Everyone watches content like this to help them fall asleep, so before we begin, I'd like to know where you're tuning in from and what time it is in your location. Remember, this story is designed to entertain and inform, not to promote any actions or thoughts that could be harmful. Now, let me tell you about Desmond, born on the 18th of March, 1980, at Torrance Memorial Hospital. From her earliest moments, she was the center of attention, yet her entrance into the world was marked by a serious challenge, a hole in her diaphragm. This required numerous surgeries, and her chances of survival were estimated at just 20%. Miraculously, she not only made it through, but grew into a thriving young woman. Her friends and family knew Desmond as a bright, confident individual, unafraid to voice her opinions. She had a vibrant energy and a warm affection for those she loved, many in her life. After graduating from North Torrance High School, she earned a master's degree in criminal justice from Long Beach State. Yet, unsure of her true calling, she changed her career path and decided to become a teacher. Her goal was to work with autistic children, and shortly after her passing, she received news that she had obtained her teaching credential, an achievement that brought her joy and pride. Desmond was beloved by many, a friend to all. Her personality could be gentle and sweet, but she was also resilient and tough as nails when needed. She could command a room full of patrons at a bar with ease, often singing her favorite karaoke songs like Black Velvet or These Boots Were Made for Walking, always taking center stage again. It was the secondary family she built through her work in various pubs that kept her motivated despite her relatives' wishes for her to pursue different paths. In 2009, Desmond worked at a bar on a Saturday, the 14th of February. Her shift ended at 9:30 in the evening, after which she walked just 2 blocks to the well-known Bar Street Lounge. Many employees there knew her well, as she often helped her friends behind the bar, and she was captured on security footage assisting others during the night. She left only after closing around 2 a.m., and no one saw her afterward. On the following Monday, February 16, at about 2:20 in the afternoon, a final chapter began that would change everything. The San Bernardino County Sheriff's Office received a distressing call, reporting a suspicious object valued at approximately $100,000 near a local bar, where witnesses last saw Corey, the driver. He had stopped to remove snow chains from his vehicle when he suddenly detected a strong, unsettling odor. Upon exiting the car, he initially presumed the smell stemmed from an animal struck on the roadway, but decided to investigate further. Nearby, he discovered a large black plastic bag containing a woman's body, shocking him into panic. Dashing into the street, he flagged down passing vehicles and requested assistance, as his phone had unexpectedly run out of battery. Authorities later identified the victim through fingerprints and her driver's license, confirming her identity as 28-year-old Corey, the daughter of Desmond. The woman had been subjected to a violent assault, with signs of strangulation and multiple bruises on her face and neck, along with injuries to the back of her head. Although she fought back, leaving defensive wounds, investigators could not precisely determine her time of death. Medical experts estimated she had been on the street for between 12 and 36 hours before her body was discovered. Notably, her pants were unbuttoned and pulled down to her knees, yet no evidence suggested any sexual contact. Early into the investigation, authorities surmised that the location where Corey's body was found was not her point of death, but rather a dumping site, presumably chosen by the perpetrator to delay discovery. The rain that fell before her body was found had washed away most traces, complicating the search for further evidence. Reporting such tragic news is perhaps the most challenging aspect of a police officer's duties, especially when informing families about their loved ones. At the time, Corey lived with her grandmother, who was overwhelmed by the devastating discovery of her granddaughter's remains inside a garbage bag. Her grandfather, Mark, understood well how sluggish the justice process could be, often delayed by bureaucracy, waiting for warrants, conducting searches, and gathering evidence. Frustrated by the slow pace, Mark decided to take matters into his own hands, driven by his love for Corey. His determination led him to locate her Jeep, found abandoned in an alley near her workplace, a bar where she had last been seen on the evening of February 15th. According to witnesses and staff, Corey had finished her shift around 9:30 that night. Her grandmother, accustomed to her granddaughter's independent routines, including staying out late or visiting friends, did not immediately panic, trusting her daughter's judgment. Meanwhile, investigators revisited the scene and interviewed bar employees to gather additional details, hoping to uncover clues or witness testimonies that could shed light on Corey's disappearance and violent death. After a routine shift at her friend's favorite local bar, she often lingered to socialize or assist behind the counter, earning extra tips as patrons recognized her face. Surveillance footage confirmed her regular presence, capturing her helping out or chatting with friends, her familiar face blending into the bar's usual scene. Being a bartender's assistant wasn't just about pouring drinks. It meant engaging with a diverse crowd, some of whom, after drinking, could lose control. That evening she encountered such an individual, an unwelcome guest whose provocative behavior disrupted the lively atmosphere. Eyewitnesses describe her confronting the man, who was acting provocatively, bothering women, and making inappropriate remarks. Unpopular with the other patrons, he refused to leave until she firmly told him he was not welcome. Although furious, he ultimately complied and exited. She resumed her duties, making drinks as if nothing had happened, consuming alcohol that night but maintaining composure the entire time. Around 2 a.m, she left the bar alone, intending to head home. Tragically, her body was later discovered about 100 meters from the establishment. The following day, Mark provided investigators with information from local TV broadcasts and urged the public to share any relevant details. Police identified the man she had argued with that evening. During questioning, he claimed not to remember her name but acknowledged an altercation at the bar on February 14th. He explained that alcohol had caused his outbursts that night, and afterward, he returned home to sleep. He denied any involvement, agreed to a polygraph test, and permitted searches of his residence and vehicle. Authorities inspected his car looking for evidence such as bloodstains or hair, but the vehicle was excessively dirty and yielded no clues. A house search also produced no indications linking him to the crime. The final evidence sought was the polygraph, which he passed easily, answering all questions convincingly. His wife supported his timeline, confirming he arrived home before 2 a.m. and went straight to bed, just as she remembered her leaving the bar. Given that she departed at 2 and her body was found nearby shortly after, the police excluded him as a suspect. Unfortunately, with no other persons of interest identified, investigators faced a lack of leads. They investigated her personal life for potential enemies, but uncovered a peculiar detail. Earlier that night, she had asked for permission to use the bar's restroom. Being closed at that hour, the owner refused, advising her to return home. Around 2, she departed, and her tragic end came shortly afterward. On the morning following the incident, the events that transpired remained shrouded in mystery, as Corey never entered her vehicle nor returned home. Investigators suspected that she had been abducted or harmed near her workplace, yet surveillance footage from nearby bars failed to capture anything unusual, and no witnesses were present on the street late at night. At the time of her death, Corey's blood alcohol level was more than 4 times the legal limit for driving, making it unclear whether she intended to drive or was simply seeking alternative transportation home. Sadly, she encountered no one willing to assist her that night. A month later, the case had reached a standstill, with authorities reviewing all possible leads and theories, but no new suspects emerged. Undeterred, Corey's father, Mark, refused to give up. He rented 3 electronic billboards along Aria Boulevard in Redondo Beach, displaying a recent photo of his daughter alongside the question, who might have ended Corey's life? With a reward of $155,000 offered for information leading to a breakthrough, Mark explained that he intended to keep the message visible, hoping to reach someone who knew something that could help find the responsible party. Maybe it will save someone, he said, emphasizing his determination. This approach mirrored the case of Alexander Kemp, where persistent efforts and billboard campaigns played a key role in uncovering the truth. After repeated broadcasts, information about Corey's case gradually surfaced. In May of 2009, a phone call to the police station changed everything. A woman named Tiffany, overwhelmed by stress and fear, quietly reported seeing one of the billboards featuring Corey's photo, which prompted her to come forward with vital information. Tiffany explained that she and her boyfriend, Tony Perez, had a romantic dinner planned for Valentine's Day. She had spent the evening preparing, taking the children to their grandparents, visiting a beauty salon, and buying a new red dress, something Tony loved. He often reacted strongly when she wore red, and that night was no exception. Tony was working on Valentine's Day, but had to return home around 11:30 in the evening. Tiffany waited for him, trying to contact him throughout the night, but he didn't answer. He finally arrived back home around 4 in the morning. One morning, he casually claimed to be too intoxicated to return home, saying he had fallen asleep in his car. Tiffany observed that Tony rarely bothered with cleaning the vehicle's interior, but within days, he bought a complete set of cleaning supplies and scrubbed the car meticulously, refusing her help. His behavior seemed odd, yet she dismissed it at the time. Over the following days, Tony unexpectedly sold his white Dodge for a fraction of its value and changed his phone number without any apparent reason. Soon after, they took a trip to Big Bear Lake, chatting as usual until Tony suddenly pulled over, turned to Tiffany, and asked if she thought that girl, the bartender, was dumped there. He claimed to be nearly certain that authorities had already found her body nearby. Tony Perez and Tiffany had shared life for about 4 years and had a 6-year-old son, though they never formalized their relationship through marriage. Tony was known as diligent and well-liked, with no criminal record. Coming from a large family of 8 siblings, he grew up in the Los Angeles area and finished high school in Manhattan Beach. During the time of Corey's death, on the day Tony was preoccupied with cleaning and urgently selling his car, he made that strange trip and later made a bizarre remark about where police had supposedly discovered her body. A series of odd actions, including changing his phone number and his peculiar conduct, raised Tiffany's suspicions that he could be involved in Corey Desmond's death. Reluctant to accept the possibility, Tiffany watched as authorities decided to question Tony. They went to his residence, intending to gather information without alarming him, and Tiffany agreed to cooperate, keeping the investigation discreet from him. To him, their visit seemed like a routine interview to identify witnesses related to Corey's case. Tony appeared calm and unconcerned, insisting he didn't know her personally and only saw her in the newspapers. Yet, for his arrest, officers needed concrete evidence. The investigators traced the white Dodge shortly after Corey's death, discovering that Tony had sold it at a low price to a new owner who permitted them to examine it for clues. Although Tony had thoroughly cleaned the vehicle, experts used luminol and ultraviolet light to inspect its interior. Bright blue fluorescence revealed why he had gotten rid of the car. The inside had been heavily treated to hide evidence. The police then invited Tony to the station, purposely withholding the details of the find to prevent him fleeing. Initially, he denied knowing Corey, claiming he had only seen her in the media. Then, he changed his story, admitting he'd seen her near the bar and had even whistled at her. As his inconsistent statements drew suspicion, authorities presented him with photographs, further suggesting his possible involvement in her disappearance. Tony recounted that he had sold a car, which later became crucial evidence in the case. He claimed to have seen Corey outside a bar, standing under a street lamp, when suddenly she fainted and collapsed onto the sidewalk. He tried to help her, but she remained unconscious, prompting him to slap her cheeks in an attempt to revive her. Upon awakening, Corey began screaming and demanded that Tony leave her alone. Frightened, Tony said he covered her mouth, and in a panic, he unintentionally caused her to choke. Fearing repercussions, he then placed her body in the back of his vehicle and drove home. Perez described waking during the night and stepping outside, initially questioning whether it was all a nightmare. When he confirmed it was real, he returned inside and tried to sleep. The next morning, he went to work with Corey's body still in his car, and later that day, he wrapped her remains in 2 garbage bags, carrying them to a secluded spot near the roadside where he left her. Tony maintained that the death was accidental, claiming intoxication and shock led him to panic and cause her death unintentionally. However, Corey's injuries told a different story. She had severe head contusions, bruising on her face and neck, and defensive wounds on her hands. Her pants were also pulled down to her knees. Tony Perez was arrested and charged with first-degree deprivation of life. The following day, he led authorities to the site where he discarded Corey's body. In addition to his confession, forensic DNA testing linked Corey's blood to the blood found inside the car he had sold immediately after the incident. During the 2011 trial, coroner Jack Sheridan presented evidence of multiple head contusions, signs of strangulation, and blunt force trauma to her face. Sheridan also noted scratches on her body indicating she had been dragged after her death. Prosecutors argued that Tony assaulted Corey and attempted to coerce her into intimacy. They explained that she resisted on the morning of February 15, 2009, leading Perez to strangle her when she refused to comply. Tiffany, her former partner, testified that Tony had an insatiable sexual desire during January and February of that year, despite their frequent intimacy. She revealed that Tony, in 2 instances, had physically forced himself onto her while she was asleep and under the influence of painkillers after childbirth. Tony chose not to testify but made a brief statement during sentencing. He expressed that he had been taught to treat others with respect and love, but admitted that he had strayed from those principles, forgetting the lessons he had been given. Throughout my life, I have become someone who takes pride in being a man, a father, a caring uncle to many, and a responsible provider for my loved ones. In the end, Perez maintained that he fell short of the standards he aspired to. His attorney, Andrew Hennell, reiterated at the trial that Perez was overwhelmed by fear and did not intend to cause harm. He explained that Perez found Desmond unconscious on the sidewalk, tried to soothe her, and genuinely did not intend to take her life. Reflecting on his actions, Perez admitted that he should have paused and thought more carefully. Fear overtook his judgment, leading to a reckless mistake. Desmond's father, Mark, spoke of his daughter's promising future before her life was tragically cut short at the age of 28. Her loss was a devastating blow to her family. Her father passionately stated that Perez must carry the burden of knowing he shattered not only Desmond's hopes, but also the future of her children. He described Perez as embodying traits that society often fears in women, implying qualities that contributed to the tragedy. Just before sentencing, Perez addressed the court and asked for mercy, expressing deep remorse and offering heartfelt apologies to Desmond's family and his own. Desmond's grandmother, Beverly, voiced her hope that Perez remains incarcerated, wishing he experiences the suffering Desmond's family endured. She wished he would never be free to harm others again. In July of 2011, a jury composed of 6 men and 6 women found 36-year-old Tony Lopez Perez guilty of first-degree deprivation of life. He was sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 25 years. Corey Desmond's relatives expressed their appreciation to Tiffany Ware, who played a crucial role in the case. Her efforts assisted the police in identifying the perpetrator, and Lizzie Schwab, a close family friend and trial attendee, acknowledged that without her, justice might not have been served. In a separate, unrelated incident in June of 2011, life for the Waller family took a sudden turn. Jackie informed her sister Cheryl that she planned to pick up her children from her ex-husband Clay. Although Jackie intended to return home later that day, she never arrived, nor did she make contact. Growing increasingly anxious and unable to reach her, Cheryl's concern intensified by around 7 in the evening, leaving her worried about her sister's safety. Cheryl decided to visit the police station and made a startling claim. She believed that Clay had caused her sister's disappearance. This accusation shocked the officers, especially since Jackie had called just a few hours earlier, and there had been no signs of immediate trouble or danger at that time. Despite the unusual nature of Cheryl's statement, it soon became clear that her intuition was correct. Jackie was indeed in a troubling situation. But what exactly had happened to her, and why was Cheryl so convinced her sister's ex-husband was responsible, even before Jackie was officially reported missing? Before her disappearance, Jackie was known for her kindness, warmth, and compassion. When she met Clay, an immediate connection formed between them. Clay had a speech impediment that often led to him being mocked by others, making social interactions difficult and embarrassing for him. Unlike others who might have ridiculed him, Jackie stood by his side, defending him from unkind treatment. She was passionate about protecting vulnerable people, fighting injustice, and helping those around her. Their bond grew quickly, culminating in marriage when both were about 30 years old, with hopes of building a large family. They purchased a modest home in Sanguine View, Missouri, where Jackie started to nurture her family life. While Jackie enjoyed a successful career, Clay struggled with steady employment, often facing setbacks and short-lived jobs. As a result, Jackie became the main breadwinner, balancing her work and household responsibilities. She dreamed of having children and, after undergoing fertility treatments, was overjoyed when she learned she was expecting triplets. 2 girls, Abe and Addison, and a boy, Maddox. Caring for 3 young children simultaneously was demanding, yet Jackie handled everything without complaint, taking on full responsibility while Clay showed little interest in their well-being. At that time, Clay took a job with the sheriff's office, but was quickly dismissed after about a year. Only Jackie's parents and sister helped with the children during that period, providing her some respite. When Clay lost his job, Jackie stepped up once again to support her family. Despite the arrival of their children, Clay's behavior remained unchanged. He showed minimal engagement with either his wife or children, and occasionally took on part-time work that often failed to provide adequate income. It seemed he was comfortable living off Jackie's hard-earned efforts. Meanwhile, Jackie's career advanced rapidly, and she soon secured a management position at an insurance agency. Despite all her efforts, Clay remained largely detached from family life, leaving Jackie to shoulder most responsibilities herself. This progression in their circumstances led Clay to relax his stance towards financial obligations, yet he failed to appreciate his wife's unwavering efforts. Instead, he mistreated her in numerous ways, often insulting her and belittling her worth by claiming no one truly wanted her. His dishonest affairs and abusive behavior inflicted deep emotional pain on Jackie, prompting concern from her parents and sister, who strongly urged her to leave him. Despite their advice, Jackie hesitated to take such a drastic step, striving instead to preserve their marriage at first. As days passed, hope diminished that reconciliation was possible, especially as their financial struggles intensified. Clay's unemployment, combined with Jackie's income insufficient to support their large family, worsened their situation. Rising mortgage debts resulted in the foreclosure of their home, prompting Jackie to move in with her sister. Around this time, Clay relocated to a friend's place, and their children were growing older. Faced with these mounting challenges, Jackie made the difficult decision to seek divorce, believing a better life was deserved by her and her children. When she approached Clay about ending their marriage, he initially appeared calm, but soon his stance shifted. His response turned threatening, warning her that departing from him would be akin to issuing a death sentence for herself and the children. These ominous comments frightened Jackie, yet she remained resolute in her decision to free herself from an unbearable situation. To ensure her safety, Jackie confided in her family and began documenting Clay's behavior in a diary. Recognizing the danger of his stalking, she and her children moved temporarily to her sister's house. Though her children were only 5 and didn't fully grasp the gravity of the situation, Jackie explained that their current living arrangements were vital for their protection. Over time, life began to stabilize, and as the divorce process approached its conclusion, Clay seemed to accept their separation, ceasing his harassment. The two even started forming new relationships separately. Jackie permitted Clay visitation rights, which helped reduce conflicts. On June 1st, 2011, Clay and Jackie agreed to meet at their attorney's office to settle remaining divorce details. That day, their son Maddox stayed with Clay, while Jackie's other children were with her sister Cheryl. After the appointment, Jackie intended to pick up Maddox from Clay's house before returning to Cheryl's place. She called her sister to confirm everything went smoothly and that she was headed to retrieve Maddox. This track of communication marked the last time they spoke, leaving her with an uncertain future. As time went on, Jackie's sister grew increasingly worried and attempted to contact her repeatedly. When her calls went unanswered, she tried reaching Clay, but he did not respond either. This raised her suspicions, prompting her to believe that something was seriously wrong. In a firm move, she sent Clay a message. If she did not hear from Jackie within 5 minutes, she would involve the authorities. Almost instantly, Clay returned her call, questioning her concern. Cheryl responded with certainty, asserting that Clay clearly knew more about Jackie's disappearance than he admitted. Clay insisted he had no idea where Jackie was and said he had instructed her to call Cheryl once he saw her. Still, Cheryl remained convinced something was off. She decided to take her sister's children to their parents' house and reported Jackie's confirmed absence to the police herself. Initially, Cheryl was hesitant about Clay's involvement, but law enforcement agents listened carefully to her concerns. They did not delay their response, opting to investigate without waiting a whole day. Their first step was to contact Jackie's ex-husband for any clues about her location. When questioned, 41-year-old Clay claimed he had shared a lunch with Jackie and later visited his attorney to discuss their divorce. He said that after their meeting he went to a store and upon returning, noticed that Jackie's car was missing. Clay believed she had driven away. He mentioned that his son Mid-X was in Illinois with his new girlfriend and insisted Jackie was aware of this. According to Clay, her visit had been solely about their son, not to discuss anything else. Cheryl, however, found his explanation suspicious and inconsistent with what she knew about Jackie's intentions. Jackie's sole purpose for visiting Clay, she testified, was to see her son. She would not have allowed her son to be away with someone else without good reason. These contradictions prompted Cheryl to convince investigators that Clay's story lacked credibility, suggesting he might be withholding critical information about Jackie's disappearance. With this new perspective, the case gained urgency, especially since Jackie and her vehicle remained unlocated. Within hours of Jackie's disappearance, authorities discovered her Honda Pilot on an interstate highway, featuring a flat tire, but there was no evidence of a collision. The tire appeared deliberately punctured, making it seem staged. The vehicle was open and empty, with a few blood stains on the back seat, disturbing clues that pointed to an assault or abduction. The search efforts centered on the area where the car was found. Numerous volunteers, including police officers, rescue teams with search dogs, and family members joined the effort. They responded to calls for assistance from Jackie's relatives and conducted a widespread hunt across the region. But no further signs of Jackie or her vehicle surfaced immediately. Many people sought to assist in her recovery amid oppressive heat, offering their help to locate Jackie. In response, she announced a reward of $3,500 for any clues about her whereabouts. Despite their dedicated efforts, including extensive searches and public appeals, the search remained unsuccessful for several days. As time passed without progress, investigators began to scrutinize Clay, Jackie's ex-husband, more closely. When they returned to his residence to question him again, he maintained the same story he had previously shared but refused to allow access to his home and vehicle. He promptly retained legal counsel who asserted his rights. For days following Jackie's disappearance, Clay left a voicemail message expressing distress. "Hi honey, it's Sunday. You went missing on Wednesday. Please call me if you receive this message. I don't know where you are and I miss you very much." This message underscored his concern. Soon detectives obtained a search warrant, leading to a thorough inspection of Clay's house and vehicle. During the search, they uncovered stains resembling fish blood in his car. Laboratory analysis confirmed they were indeed fish blood. The vehicle had been deliberately coated with it. Clay had recorded this act on video as a test for forensic experts. Further investigation revealed suspicious details within Clay's home. A section of carpet had been torn from the floor, leaving a clear mark, and tiny blood-like drops were found on the walls of the hallway leading to the basement. These findings raised serious questions about his potential involvement and intentions regarding Jackie's disappearance. The forensic team also observed signs of furniture being rearranged, suggesting unusual activity inside the house. In an underground area, they examined beneath the floorboards and discovered a carpet stained with blood. Blood samples both from the house and the carpet were sent to the laboratory for detailed analysis. Authorities tracked Jackie's last known movements to roughly 10 minutes past midnight narrowing the focus of their investigation and raising further questions about the events leading up to her disappearance. At approximately 2 hours after being seen at a drugstore with her former husband, she was observed withdrawing money from an ATM. Following this, she vanished from CCTV footage without any further sightings. Meanwhile, Clay was captured later that day at a toy store with his son and new partner. Soon after, they visited a car wash in their pickup truck, which contained a suspicious trash can inside. By this point, Clay had changed his clothing and thoroughly cleaned both his vehicle and boat, fueling suspicions and establishing him as the primary suspect. Authorities released images of Clay's pickup and boat, seeking witnesses who might have seen them. A young couple reported spotting Clay near Devil's Island on the Mississippi River. Investigators verified this tip through cell phone billing records, prompting them to intensify their search efforts in that vicinity. Despite multiple extensive searches, no definitive evidence linking him to the missing woman emerged. Later, forensic analysis confirmed that bloodstains found in Clay's house matched Jackie's DNA. With this discovery, law enforcement assumed her case was likely a tragic disappearance. They brought Clay in for questioning, aiming to obtain a confession regarding Jackie's fate. He denied any involvement, claiming the bloodstains were remnants of an old domestic disagreement, and presented no physical remains or conclusive evidence suggesting her death. Without tangible proof, authorities had no grounds for formal charges and released him under surveillance. Aware of the constant monitoring, Clay, a former deputy sheriff, engaged in deceptive tactics to evade detection. He would frequent abandoned lots and other deserted areas to mislead investigators, all while the community actively searched for Jackie. In a display of defiance, he often drove past search parties and her family members, insulting them, giving obscene gestures, and shouting that their efforts were futile. His provocative behavior intensified suspicion and concern. Meanwhile, Jackie's sister Cheryl fought in court for custody of her triplets, worried they might end up with a father displaying unpredictable and dangerous behavior. Her efforts were successful and she was awarded custody. Clay, enraged by the ruling, issued threats of violence towards Cheryl, even posting about these threats on social media. Recognizing the danger, authorities intercepted the messages and arrested him nearly 5 months after Jackie's disappearance. Clay admitted to making threats, claiming they stemmed from frustration and grief over losing custody of his children. He insisted he had no malicious intentions towards Cheryl or her family, viewing himself as a victim amid the turmoil. During the investigation of this incident involving his sister, authorities uncovered that he was facing additional charges, including theft of $50,000 from a former employer and surveillance of a man. Detectives, hoping for a confession, questioned a former co-worker of Clay's, pressing him to reveal whether Clay had confessed to killing his ex-wife or to help locate her remains. However, such efforts proved futile as Clay continued to deny any involvement in Jackie's disappearance. Instead, he confidently claimed to know who was responsible for her death, a man named Harry, yet investigators had already thoroughly examined this lead. Harry possessed a solid alibi that ruled him out, leaving all evidence pointing solely to Clay. Despite this, Clay persisted in denying any guilt, ultimately serving 5 years in prison for threatening Cheryl. Meanwhile, the police maintained their search for Jackie's remains, scouring Devil's Island, but without success. Approximately 2 years after her disappearance, law enforcement gathered substantial circumstantial evidence, video footage, bloodstains in Clay's home, and other traces linking him to the crime. Facing mounting proof, authorities decided to charge Clay with her murder, even though her body was still missing, a risky move, as losing the case could prevent prosecution a second time. The prosecution, however, remained resolute. After discussions with his legal team, Clay concluded that striking a deal was in his best interest. He would admit guilt and disclose her burial site. This compromise was made to give Jackie a proper burial, which her family valued deeply. Under police guidance, Clay led officers to a secluded, unused sandbar on the Illinois side of the Mississippi River, where Jackie was buried. Initially, Clay struggled to recall the exact spot, but then mentioned placing a bag of fertilizer over her grave. One officer, an avid gardener, explained that large amounts of fertilizer could harm trees, leading them to examine nearby dead trees. Their search uncovered 3 with suspiciously withered branches, and digging beneath one revealed Jackie's body, dressed in her last known clothes. Identification was confirmed through dental records, and her family finally recognized her remains. With this confirmation, they could properly lay her to rest, and her funeral was held on her parents' golden wedding anniversary. Cheryl then informed her children that their mother had been killed by their father, a revelation that deeply shocked the entire family, leaving them grieving the loss of both parents at once. The children developed a strong aversion to Clay, refusing any further contact. As part of Clay's plea agreement, he was required to confess explicitly and detail the circumstances of the murder. He explained that thoughts of violence had begun to take shape some time before the act, indicating a complex and remorseful reflection on the events that led to his wife's death. Approximately a year before the tragic event, Jackie announced their separation, yet he struggled to suppress dark thoughts, primarily because she was the mother of his children. The idea of her taking custody haunted him deeply, leading him to warn her that such actions might lead to severe consequences for her. However, she ignored his warnings, which he then attributed to her fault. On the night before the murder, Clay traveled to a remote spot on Devil's Island, where he prepared a grave for Jackie. He claimed that their divorce process was progressing smoothly and that this act was motivated by impulsive emotional distress. Earlier that day, after visiting their lawyer, they had a conversation in which she suggested they share one last intimate moment. Later, they returned to his house, where they searched for a snack in the kitchen. During this casual moment, Clay accidentally hit Jackie with his head, causing her nose to bleed, which angered her. She stormed into the hallway, smeared blood on the walls, and yelled that he would never see his children again. At that point, Clay lost control. He struck her in the face and then strangled her. He then removed her body, deposited it in a dumpster, and buried it in the pre-dug grave. Afterwards, he meticulously cleaned both the car and the house, took a shower, changed clothes, and behaved as if nothing had happened. Later, he met his new partner and son in a toy store. Throughout this entire sequence, Clay insisted that his actions were driven solely by impulse and emotion, denying any premeditation. However, his earlier statement about digging the grave the day before contradicted this, raising suspicions of deliberate planning. If he had no intention of killing Jackie, why would he have prepared the grave beforehand? Medical experts found multiple skull fractures on Jackie's remains, indicating blunt force trauma rather than a simple fistfight. No one believed Clay's version of events. He showed no remorse for his actions and appeared elated at receiving a 20-year sentence for second-degree murder, with the possibility of early release. The prosecution undermined his credibility further when it emerged that he had dug the grave in Illinois, while the murder took place in Missouri. This crossed state lines and violated federal law against domestic violence, which allowed prosecutors to add an additional 35 years to his sentence. Clay Waller will be eligible for parole after serving 85% of his 55-year sentence. Interestingly, Clay was unaware of these legal details and did not anticipate the consequences of his own confession. Nonetheless, his brutality persisted. He wrote a book about Jackie's murder, aiming to profit from her tragedy. Jackie's sister and her husband continue to raise her children with the support of their aging parents. The children have grown up holding their mother in the highest regard, remembering her as an extraordinary woman who remains forever in their hearts. Despite lingering resentment toward their father and profound longing for their mother, the hearts of the family remained wounded. Jamie Hahn, born on October 25, 1983, grew up in Orangeburg, South Carolina, surrounded by her 2 brothers, Brett and Justin, and her sister Ashley. Even after her parents' separation and subsequent remarriages, Jamie maintained a cheerful demeanor. She attended a small but highly respected private preparatory school, known for its academic excellence. During junior high, she visited the University of North Carolina with classmates and instantly fell in love with the campus, inspiring her to pursue higher education there. As a student, Jamie aimed to make a difference, actively supporting troubled youth by joining the board of the Center of Hope. Her commitment to assisting others extended into her political involvement. She participated in various campaigns, notably during Senator John Edwards' bid for the presidency in 2008, an effort he ran against Barack Obama. Her engagement in these efforts elevated her profile within North Carolina's Democratic Party. It was during this period that she met Nation, forming a close professional bond that gradually developed into a romantic relationship. 4 months after their initial romantic encounter, they announced their engagement and later married on April 18, 2009. Their love was rooted in deep friendship and mutual respect. Both pursued successful careers. Jamie managed her own political fundraising consulting firm, while Nation became a prominent online strategist, supporting politicians and nonprofits. Described by friends and colleagues as exceptionally kind, gentle, and generous, they were highly regarded in their community. Their marriage was marked by a strong commitment, and they actively participated in initiatives like the Coalition to support young families in North Carolina. Though they had no children at the time, Jamie and Nation planned to start a family soon. Known for her compassion and infectious enthusiasm, Jamie was loved by her family and friends, and her talents in politics painted a bright future for her. However, their seemingly idyllic life abruptly unraveled on the evening of April 22, 2013, around 5:20 p.m., shattering the peace they had built. Jamie hurriedly fled her house, sprinting several dozen meters before collapsing unconscious in a neighbor's yard. Her body was soaked in blood, shocking those who witnessed her distress. They immediately called for emergency assistance. A nearby resident, observing the chaos, quickly dialed the authorities. Although disoriented, Jamie managed to whisper that someone named John, still inside her house, had assaulted her with a blade. Responding swiftly, rescuers applied a towel to her numerous abdominal wounds and urgently called for an ambulance and police backup. When police arrived, they followed the trail of blood back to the Hahn residence. Carefully surrounding the house, officers ordered anyone inside to exit with raised hands. Soon, a disheveled, bald man appeared on the porch, bearing injuries to his wrists and a wound in his abdomen. Due to his critical condition, he was transported by ambulance to the hospital, accompanied by an officer. During transport, the injured individual became visibly upset, expressing remorse and a longing to end his suffering, murmuring these feelings repeatedly. After medical treatment, investigators sought to identify him and understand the events that led to this violence. They quickly determined that he was a 31-year-old man named Jonathan Wayne Brill, a close associate of the Hahn family and a guest in their home. Jamie also knew Jonathan well, having employed him as an accountant in her political consulting firm. After relocating to North Carolina, he had stayed with the couple temporarily until he could find his own residence. Jonathan and the Hahn family shared a long history. They had met in their hometown in 2000 during a church trip. Despite a 4-year age gap, they quickly became close friends. Like many childhood connections, they drifted apart during college but reconnected afterward and becoming almost inseparable. Jonathan even served as the best man at Jamie and Nation's wedding in April of 2009. The trio's bond resembled that of the legendary Three Musketeers, sharing vacations, weekly dinners, and holiday celebrations. To neighbors, Jonathan seemed almost like an extended member of the Hahn family, given how often he was at their home. This profound and seemingly unbreakable connection makes the violent attack, leaving all three between life and death, especially tragic and puzzling. Every Monday, Jamie and Nation hosted dinner for Jonathan. On that particular day, Jonathan arrived earlier than usual, intending to discuss recent campaign matters with Jamie. They were deeply concerned about his health. Jonathan had confided that he was battling pancreatic cancer, a serious and often terminal illness. Showing their care, the Hahns had accompanied him to his medical appointments, trying to support him through his struggles. Throughout his difficult journey, Jimmy consistently stood by Jonathan, offering unwavering support during his intense struggle for health. At one point, overwhelmed by emotion, Jimmy asked Nation whether they should consider starting a family soon, so their future child might have the chance to know Jonathan. Their deep affection for him was evident, They desired even a yet-to-be-conceived child to share a bond with their close friend. The recent diagnosis of cancer was a brutal blow, but it was not Jonathan's first health crisis. Over the years, he had been hospitalized multiple times, once revealing to Nation that he was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis during a gallbladder surgery. In response, the Hans family had invited Jonathan to temporarily stay with them, providing care and comfort as he fought to regain strength. On that particular Monday, Jimmy and Jonathan were deeply engrossed in a related conversation in the kitchen when Nation arrived home and went upstairs to change. He was suddenly startled by Jimmy's screams, calling out his and Jonathan's names. Assuming Jimmy might have fallen due to her medical history, Nation hurried downstairs, only to be met with a scene of horror. Jimmy, visibly terrified, was crying out that someone was trying to attack her. As Nation rushed into the kitchen, he saw his wife on the floor, bleeding heavily, while Jonathan stood over her, wielding a large kitchen knife. Jonathan then raised the weapon threateningly as Jimmy began advancing toward Nation, knife in hand. In shock, Nation froze, staggering under the weight of this nightmare. Acting instinctively in self-defense, he managed to grab the knife with one hand while striking Jonathan across the face with the other. During the chaotic moments, he frantically shouted for Jimmy to escape to safety, desperately trying to calm and subdue a man who had been his close friend just moments before, an almost unthinkable situation. Despite her serious injuries, Jimmy somehow managed to get up and flee through a side door. Once outside, she ran to the nearest neighbor's house, seeking help. Unfortunately, no one answered her urgent knocking. Summoning her remaining strength, she tried to reach another house, but collapsed unconscious in the yard, overwhelmed by her injuries. The noise and screams attracted the attention of passers-by, who quickly responded, with one neighbor calling for emergency services and police. Meanwhile, Nation, driven by panic, searched intensely for Jimmy, following a trail of blood that eventually led him to her in a neighbor's yard. She was conscious but in agony, clutching her side. Kneeling beside her, Nation took her hand, attempting to offer comfort and hope for recovery, future anniversaries, and seaside vacations. As tears streamed down his face, he was overwhelmed by the thought of a life without her. Unable to contain his emotion, he struggled to envision their peaceful future, painfully aware of how suddenly and tragically everything had changed. Life changed abruptly when a sudden crisis unfolded, forcing everyone to act swiftly. As witnesses watched in shock, a neighbor quickly pressed a towel against Jamin's bleeding abdomen, but it was soon soaked through with blood. Another compassionate neighbor raised Jamin's legs onto a bundle of leaves, attempting to ease her discomfort. Though an ambulance was dispatched promptly, the minutes felt agonously long to onlookers as Jamin's breathing grew increasingly irregular, an unmistakable sign of her critical condition. When paramedics arrived, they immediately began life-saving procedures. Meanwhile, Nation had sustained serious cuts to his hand while struggling with a knife and desperately needed medical care himself. Both Jamin and Nation were rushed to the hospital. During transit, Jamin lost consciousness and was taken straight into emergency surgery, while Nation, overwhelmed with worry, received stitches and was kept in shock, repeatedly asking for news about Jamin. Despite his pain, he couldn't stop hoping and praying for her survival. Jamin's injuries were severe, more than a dozen stab wounds, a severed artery, and extensive liver damage. Weary but hopeful, her loved ones held onto the possibility of her recovery. Initially, she survived the operation, but tragically, she never regained consciousness. 2 days later, Jamin succumbed to her injuries. An autopsy revealed a grim reality. She had sustained 24 stab wounds across her face, neck, back, hands, and forearms. The most devastating injuries were to her abdomen and chest, causing catastrophic damage to her lungs and liver. Meanwhile, Jonathan Brill had inflicted wounds upon himself and was hospitalized for over a week to recover from his injuries. On Tuesday, the 30th of April, in 2013, still needing medical attention, he was transported in a stretcher to Wake County's magistrate's office. He was formally charged with first-degree murder of Jamin Han and with assault using a deadly weapon against Nation Han. Due to the seriousness of these charges, he was held without bail at Central Prison in Raleigh. This facility was chosen intentionally because it included a medical wing, ensuring Brill continued receiving treatment during his detention. The sudden loss of Jamin profoundly affected everyone, leaving lingering questions about her killer, someone she once considered a close friend, who robbed her of her future for reasons that remain uncertain. Amid the chaos, rumors circulated about a significant sum of money that had vanished during an election campaign managed by Jamin's team. Although Jonathan Brill had officially ended his role with the company at the end of 2012, he remained responsible for certain financial matters, raising suspicions that continued to haunt those involved. Jamin, involved in managing financial transactions and preparing reports, began to suspect that a significant sum, over $50,000, was missing from the accounts she oversaw. Her suspicion grew as she confronted Jonathan about the discrepancy, which may have sparked his explosive outburst. On April 22, 2013, Jamin had invited Jonathan to their routine Monday dinner, planning to discuss the company's financial concerns. The exact details of what transpired during Jonathan's brief absence remain uncertain, but it's widely believed that Jamin challenged him about the missing funds during that time. Over the following months, while Jonathan's physical injuries healed, the emotional and psychological wounds endured deeply. 6 months after the tragedy, Jamin's family and her grieving husband scattered her ashes near Pulaski Memorial Baptist Church. This location was meaningful, as Jamin had dedicated much of her time volunteering there. Ironically, just a week before the incident, the Hans family had asked their church's pastor to pray for Jonathan, who they believed was battling cancer. Little did they know that soon it would be they who needed their community's prayers. In the aftermath of such an unfathomable loss, Jonathan faced the painful reality that someone he had known since childhood, the woman he loved more than anything, had been taken from him, and her life had been forever altered. Jonathan regarded Jamin as his anchor, his strength, and his soulmate. The thought that life would go on without her was almost too much to bear. The criminal trial of Brill began on March 4th of 2015. The district attorney revealed to the jury that Jonathan, in his role as Jamin's financial manager, had written 39 checks to himself, misappropriating approximately $50,000. He attempted to justify his actions through claims of health problems, including brain impairment from multiple sclerosis, a gallbladder removal, and pancreatic cancer. Throughout this period, Jamin was compassionate and tactful, choosing not to confront him directly about such a delicate issue, hoping that Brill would recognize and correct his mistakes. However, the situation took a startling turn when a debt collector contacted Jamin, revealing the truth about Brill's health. Court records showed that Brill's first hospitalization had occurred following an incident at the Hans family's residence. Prior to that, there was no record of him seeking medical treatment, and he had deceived Jamin and her husband about his health. No gallbladder surgery or serious illnesses like multiple sclerosis or cancer had taken place. Instead, he was suffering from a mental disorder with troubling signs reflected in his online searches for pancreatic cancer and specialists in that field, likely an effort to support his false claims. Jonathan also researched places he could visit without needing a passport. He had booked a one-way flight to Las Vegas for April 23rd, but canceled it just a day earlier, moments before violently attacking Jamie with a blade. Confessing to authorities, he admitted to embezzling campaign funds and inventing medical conditions to justify his absences. When the Hans accompanied him to medical appointments, he wandered aimlessly through hospital corridors, acting out of confusion and distress. Recently, Jonathan had been battling depression and thoughts of self-harm, revealing he was haunted by voices urging him to cause harm to others. He bought the knife with the intention of ending his life in Vegas, yet he feared Jamie would confront him about his financial misdeeds. When she did, he reacted by attacking himself, and in a moment of chaos, he turned his rage on her. Jamie attempted to intervene, but Jonathan was so unhinged that he impulsively assaulted his friend. He later recalled, "Some parts of the incident were blurred or erased from memory." Recognizing the weight of the evidence against him, he and his legal team knew that outright dismissal of charges was impossible. though they hoped to argue for temporary insanity to reduce his sentence. During the trial, Jonathan's lawyer and he himself expressed remorse, with Jonathan's voice trembling with sorrow as he addressed the court. He reflected on how society locks doors to protect itself from evil, yet ignores the darkness that sometimes resides within. On March 19, 2015, the jury found Jonathan guilty of first-degree murder of Jamie Hahn and attempted murder of Nation Hahn. A judge sentenced him to life imprisonment without parole. Jamie's motives had been pure, and her loss was so tragic that even Jonathan acknowledged in hindsight that honesty could have saved her. His betrayal transformed a close friendship into a nightmare. This story defies straightforward explanations. Hello friends, today I want to share another heartbreaking case with you. It involves El Maria Lopez, born on March 17th in the year 1995 in the small town of San Cristóbal Verapaz. Her family was humble and simple. Her parents were Armar Alice and Brian Lopez. El Maria was the youngest of two children, with an older brother named Omar. As a baby, she faced a severe intestinal blockage that required a complex operation, which carried uncertain prospects. Her mother's prayers and strong hope carried her through, and she survived. The surgery, performed early in her life, did not hinder her growth or development. Throughout her school years, El Maria was active, especially in gymnastics and athletics, and she also loved classical dance. Her creative spirit enabled her to communicate easily and forge bonds with a variety of people, gradually building lasting friendships. After completing her schooling, Maria leaned toward the humanities and graduated with high marks. She then chose to attend a prestigious state university, where she decided to study law. Her true passion led her to specialize in criminalistics. A memorable episode from her student years occurred when Maria and her mother visited a car showroom in the capital city of Alta Verapaz to find a special gift for Omar's 25th birthday, a motorcycle he had long desired. A courteous young sales consultant named Jorge greeted them, showing various models and offering advice. After selecting a model, they decided to seek their family's opinion before making a final choice. They left with a business card and Maria's phone number for later contact. Soon after, Jorge reached out, not about the motorcycle, but on a more personal level. Over time, their conversations became regular, and Jorge eventually asked her out for coffee. It was evident he was strongly attracted to Maria, a striking and confident brunette, though he hesitated at first about initiating their acquaintance. Maria also found him appealing. She agreed to meet him, despite being aware he was a year younger. Their connection grew quickly, and both believed in the possibility of a shared future. Their feelings felt like love at first sight, inspiring dreams of happiness together. Within a few months, they decided to cohabitate, despite their family's disapproval of such haste. Roughly 6 months later, they married in a small wedding, inviting only close relatives and friends. On the day of the celebration, unforeseen issues at the venue nearly disrupted the event, forcing the couple to cover extra costs to ensure the ceremony went ahead smoothly. Little is known about Jorge, Maria's partner, aside from his background. Born in 1996 in Santa Catalina La Latina, central Guatemala, Jorge was the eldest of two brothers, Pablo and himself. Growing up in a family often struggling with financial difficulties, his family could barely afford basic needs, and luxury items were out of reach. Despite these hardships, Jorge lacked aspirations for a better life and did not focus much on education or career development. People who knew him described him as reserved and sometimes outwardly aggressive, often struggling to manage his emotions. As a result, he had few friends and found it hard to maintain relationships. Yet, when he met his dream girl, a determination sparked within him. He worked diligently to win her affection and hurried to marry her, fearing she might change her mind. It's also noted that Maria's parents were somewhat doubtful about Jorge's suitability, reflecting typical concerns about his background and character. From the very outset, despite some early difficulties and doubts from those around them, the bond between the young couple remained strong and resilient. There was something about the man that didn't sit well with others, yet no one could quite identify what it was or convince his wife to reconsider their union. Soon after their wedding, her pregnancy became evident, and she faced the challenge of finding stable employment without a university degree. The job market was tough for someone inexperienced and expecting, leading her to accept odd jobs just to make ends meet, while her husband also lost his previous job and showed little eagerness to find new work. As their daughter Alice was born, financial hardships intensified. Both parents were unemployed, and paying rent or buying basic necessities became an ongoing struggle. Jorge eventually suggested their temporary move into his parents' house. At first, Liz Maria Lopez hesitated but had little choice, as living on the streets was no longer an option with a baby in tow. Her mother, often urging her to return home, knew of her struggles but was met with reassurances that things would improve with her husband, so she held back from intervening. Until one day her mother visited and found her daughter in a dire state, poorly nourished, eating only minor portions once a day. Jorge's family, however, showed little concern for their unemployed daughter-in-law's well-being. The lack of proper nutrition was only one of many issues she faced. She endured constant humiliation and physical abuse from her husband's younger brother, who resented her presence in the crying baby. His frustration sometimes culminated in him throwing items at her, even hitting Alice with a baby bottle during one episode. Jorge witnessed this abuse but failed to intervene, acting as if they were strangers. Eventually, Liz Maria's mother convinced her to leave her in-laws' home with her daughter and return to her parents' care. Shortly thereafter, Jorge appeared, pleading for her to come back, promising to find employment. She agreed on the condition that they rent a separate apartment, distancing themselves from his family's influence. Once Liz Maria obtained her diploma, she achieved a long-held dream by securing a position at the city prosecutor's office. Intelligent, talented, and responsible, she earned her colleagues' respect and rapidly advanced in her career. This professional success significantly improved their financial situation. They could now afford to buy a car and enjoy some comfort. However, all this progress stemmed from Liz Maria's dedication and reputation. Meanwhile, Jorge was still trying to find himself. He preferred living off his wife's earnings, driven by jealousy and laziness, and his temper grew increasingly volatile over time. Jorge preferred simple financial reliance, avoiding steady employment, and instead enjoyed lazy days at home watching TV, drinking beer with friends, and spending his wife's income. He was deeply possessive and obsessive about controlling his wife, forbidding her from forming friendships or casually socializing, such as having lunch with colleagues in cafes. Constantly monitoring her, he checked her phone and read her messages, which became an ingrained routine. Jorge also prevented her from creating social network accounts, insisting she remain entirely under his supervision. His behavior rarely improved. He often caused scenes, even in public, and perpetually accused his wife of family troubles without cause. At his parents' house, Jorge failed to defend her when she faced humiliation, insults, and occasionally physical mistreatment by relatives. He himself sometimes resorted to violence and saw nothing wrong with it. Believing she belonged to him, he expected her to tolerate everything, convinced that she wouldn't leave him. Neighbors often heard loud arguments and saw signs of abuse on the woman's face and body. Despite repeated efforts to leave him, Maria frequently moved out with her daughter to her parents' home. Each time, Jorge would come pleading for forgiveness, kneeling in remorse. Remarkably, she often forgave him and granted him another chance, despite her family's warnings to abandon the relationship. On December 15, 2020, after yet another violent incident, Maria, crying, took their 3-year-old daughter Alice and fled to her mother's house. The next day, Jorge arrived there, claiming he had found a job and wanted to reconcile, promising he would never harm her again. Believing his words once more, Maria returned to their rented apartment. By mid-January of 2021, Maria called her mother in distress, reporting that Jorge had not only failed to find work, but had also stolen her earnings, leaving the family without money. Her mother felt pity and offered financial aid to help them survive until the next paycheck. They planned to meet on the morning of January 19th, but Maria did not show up on time. Instead, she visited her daughter's workplace the following day, only to discover she hadn't been there for 2 days and was unreachable. Meanwhile, Jorge, searching for his wife, appeared at the prosecutor's office, explaining they had argued again, and he believed Maria had gone to her mother's house because she was upset with him. A concerned mother immediately sensed that something was amiss and suspected her son-in-law might not be truthful. Without hesitation, she alerted the authorities to begin searching for El Maria Lopez, and on the very same day, a nationwide alert system called Isabel Claudina was activated to locate missing young women. As the extensive search effort unfolded, the husband of El Maria Lopez quickly emerged as the sole suspect. It was evident that he had no known adversaries or apparent motives for her abduction, and he was the last person seen in her company while she was alive. Jorge denied any involvement, insisting he was distraught over her disappearance and annoyed by the accusations. Yet during police interviews, he repeatedly contradicted himself and failed to offer a convincing explanation for why he hadn't contacted authorities immediately after her disappearance. He claimed to believe she was at her mother-in-law's residence, but never called or visited there, raising further suspicion. The search took a tragic turn on January 22nd, when municipal workers responding to a blocked storm drain made a grisly discovery. While lifting the grate, they found a large plastic bag containing something dark and unrecognizable. Closer inspection revealed charred human remains, horrifically burned and unrecognizable at first glance. The shocking find was promptly reported to police, who arrived quickly to investigate. Experts initially speculated that the remains might belong to El Maria Lopez. Forensic analysis confirmed the identity, with her parents and brother recognizing her despite the severe disfigurement caused by fire. Interestingly, the location of the discovery was on the same street where she had worked at the prosecutor's office. The site lacked surveillance footage and adequate lighting, making evidence collection more challenging. Pathologists determined she had been severely beaten prior to her death, caused by asphyxiation, as evidenced by internal hemorrhages and multiple fractures. Additional signs indicated she had been strangled, with deep marks on her neck and dried blood particles in her nostrils and mouth. At the time of her discovery, no new suspects had surfaced. Her family was convinced that Jorge was responsible for her brutal killing, prompting his immediate detention. The authorities then began thorough investigations into his motives. Alongside forensic work, psychologists and criminal analysts delved into the dynamics of their marriage and family life, aiming to uncover underlying factors behind this tragic crime. An anonymous neighbor familiar with her daughter's household had often witnessed heated disputes between El Maria and her spouse. One day, out of concern, this person secretly recorded the quarrel, not realizing that this act would later reveal a tragic outcome. The audio captured Maria's desperate cries for help, interspersed with muffled sobs in the background. Hearing this, Miss Lopez was deeply shaken and expressed regret that if the witness had contacted authorities earlier, her daughter might still be alive. However, the individual who made the recording did not alert law enforcement nor visit the scene, leaving the police unable to identify or involve them as a witness. As a result, the recording was admitted as evidence in the investigation. A key witness later provided a detailed interview, emphasizing the importance for citizens to remain vigilant and to report incidents of domestic violence directly to the police. She explained that documenting key moments with devices like cameras is insufficient, and that prompt reporting could be really life-saving. The crime sparked widespread public outrage, with thousands protesting demand justice for the victim. The suspect, Jorge, was quickly detained, though he consistently denied any involvement. He claimed that he personally drove his wife to work on the day she disappeared. CCTV footage from that morning showed a vehicle matching their description heading toward her workplace, but tinted windows obscured the number of people inside. No footage recorded the car stopping or Maria exiting. Further investigation uncovered traces of blood and drag marks at the couple's rented home, suggesting violence had taken place there. An even more disturbing find was microscopic fragments of burnt tissue in the trunk of their car, indicating that her remains had been burned. Additional evidence included a recent purchase by the couple, a double orthopedic mattress. Yet what drew attention was its thick polyethylene wrapping, which forensic analysis confirmed was used to transport Maria's charred remains. Neighbors also testified that Jorge had repeatedly shouted threats to physically harm and kill his wife, especially in the days prior to her disappearance. One neighbor recalled hearing him say he would hide her body if she left him, ensuring no one would find her. Based on the detailed work of criminologists and witness accounts, the investigation painted a horrific picture. The crime was committed on the night of January 19th, 2021. The day before, the couple had argued loudly, and Jorge had once again lost his temper, resorting to physical violence. His history of temper issues and aggressive behavior added to the troubling context of the events that unfolded. This time, Jorge entered a violent rage that led to him striking his wife multiple times, causing her to scream and seek help. Though neighbors heard her cries, no one contacted authorities. During the assault, Jorge fractured her nose and inflicted a head injury. Following this brutality, he forcibly strangled her with his bare hands and then attempted to hide her body. He dragged her into the backyard, poured flammable liquid over her, and ignited her remains. Yet, he underestimated how quickly the fire would produce a thick, foul-smelling smoke, alerting neighbors and risking detection. Fearing discovery, Jorge quickly extinguished the flames, wrapped the charred remains in plastic, and moved her to a concealed spot, believing her body would never be found. Disturbingly, Jorge committed these acts in front of their young daughter, who was only about 3.5 years old at the time. Despite her tender age, she partially understood what was happening, as her crying and screams, which were recorded, attest. Leveraging his knowledge of forensic methods from his wife's extensive collection of books at home, Jorge tried to conceal his crime and establish an alibi. He chose a dark, deserted road without surveillance cameras to dispose of the remains in a drainage sewer, thinking this would erase all traces. The following morning, Jorge resumed his routine, driving along the usual route to his wife's workplace, as if he had simply taken her there. The next day, he pretended to search actively for her, calling colleagues, friends, and family. His lawyers delayed the trial as much as possible, attempting to divert suspicion by claiming that all evidence was circumstantial and lacking definitive proof of his guilt. They argued that Jorge, overwhelmed by grief and depression over the accusation, should be kept under house arrest instead of detention. However, crucial evidence emerged from Maria's phone records, which had remained with Jorge since the incident. Several messages had been sent from her device in the days following the crime, seemingly to create an illusion that she was still alive. Tracking the phone's movements revealed that it stayed in the same areas as Jorge's own device, indicating he was with it. Despite this, his defense claimed that Jorge found her phone and was using it while searching for her, an unlikely story, especially considering he was the one sending messages and making calls from his own phone, which he could not adequately explain. Further proof of Jorge's guilt appeared in the form of bruises and scratches on his body, photographed at the time of his arrest. These marks, particularly a prominent scratch, indicated that Maria had resisted and fought back during the violence. Certainly, here's the deeply reworked, concise, and polished version of the provided text, with approximately 20% reduction, clear flow, and rich detail, all crafted in fluent English. Due to the devastating fire, particles of Jorge's epithelium could not be recovered from underneath Maria's fingernails, despite extensive efforts, as the evidence was obliterated. Though many aspects of the case remained contentious, the prosecutor pushed for the maximum permissible punishment. Court proceedings were repeatedly delayed because of the ongoing global health crisis. Ultimately, in October of 2022, Jorge was convicted of his wife's violent murder and sentenced to 50 years in prison, all while maintaining his innocence. During his detention, little Alice was placed in the care of her maternal grandparents, who openly declared that their granddaughter had become the central focus of their lives. Meanwhile, during the London Olympics, a young Puerto Rican boxer, Felix Vero Sanchez, rose to prominence as a luminous talent often called a diamond. He was celebrated as one of the most promising athletes from his nation, with many predicting future titles and medals. All believed he was destined for extraordinary achievements in the sporting world. By 2021, Felix's name again appeared in the headlines, this time in connection with a troubling crime. His story involved a teenage romance that spiraled into obsession, culminating in a tragic and horrific event. The narrative also reveals how a fighter recognized as the knockout of the year in 2014, praised by Olympic champion Vasyl Lomachenko, narrowly avoided the death penalty and was instead sentenced to life imprisonment. Despite overwhelming evidence and a confession from his accomplice, Vero Sanchez continues to deny guilt. Born on 19th of May, 1993, in San Juan, Puerto Rico, Felix grew up in a large, humble family with a passion for sports from an early age. Initially, he intended to pursue a professional baseball career, but an incident at age 9 changed his trajectory. After an argument and scuffle with a visiting friend's son, Felix's father suggested boxing as a way to channel his fighting spirit. From that moment, Felix fell in love with the sport during his first gym session. By his early teens, he had already claimed victory at the Pan American Junior Championships, followed by his national championship in his country. In 2012, he reached the quarterfinals at the London Olympics, marking the beginning of an impressive professional journey. With 29 fights and 27 wins, Felix's talent was undeniable. In 2014, he delivered what critics called the best knockout of that year against Sergio Viola. The following year, Felix secured his first title, the WBO Latino belt, which he defended 6 times over the next 2 years, a clear sign that he was destined for greatness in boxing history. Similarly, Keisha Rodriguez was born in November of 1993 in San Juan. Her full name was Keisha Marlene Rodriguez Ortiz. She was raised in a close-knit family with parents, Jose and Kayla Rodriguez, and siblings, her sister Barl and her half-brother Jonathan. Outgoing and accomplished in school, Keisha also dreamed of becoming a veterinarian, fostered by her love of animals. Her sister Barl was her confidant and best friend. Felix and Keisha attended the same school and shared a romantic bond during their teenage years, strengthening the connection they both cherished. This version preserves all key details, improves the flow, removes unnecessary repetitions, and maintains clarity, all while slightly reducing the overall text length. In 2011, her parents' separation led her mother to relocate to Florida, while she and her sister remained bonded in San Juan. Despite this physical distance, their connection stayed strong. When she turned 18, she found herself caught in a complicated love triangle involving Felix, a promising young boxer who had already participated in the Olympics. Felix was not only new to fame, but also dating Elisa Maria Santiago Sierra, a rising model with a growing social media presence and her own beauty business. Yet Felix continued seeing KLA, his childhood friend, regardless of his relationship with Elisa, who believed she was his true love and future spouse. Her sister and mother knew about the affair and disapproved, yet Felix's emotions remained conflicted. His romantic life was tumultuous, marked by his increasing popularity and the attention of admirers. Despite his commitment to Elisa, he couldn't fully detach from Keisha, the girl he had loved since high school. This intense, secretive love triangle, filled with betrayal and emotional pain, eventually ended in tragedy. Felix's emerging boxing career, which promised greatness, was overshadowed by his involvement in criminal activities that left a permanent stain on his reputation. Beyond his athletic ambitions, Felix had once been her first great love. Deep down, the naive girl still secretly hoped he would choose her. In 2016, Felix married Elisa, who at the time was just 19 but already a well-known model with tens of thousands of followers and her own beauty studio. Several months after their wedding, Felix faced a severe setback, a serious motorcycle crash that left him hospitalized with head injuries, bruises, and cuts. His trainer, Ricky Marquez, feared this could jeopardize his career, yet Felix defied expectations, recovering swiftly and returning to the ring. By September of 2019, Felix shared a photo on social media with Elisa, who was then heavily pregnant. In the caption, he expressed his excitement about meeting his princess, and a month later, they announced the birth of their daughter, Miranda Vero Santiago. In public, Felix appeared to be a devoted husband, caring father, and a family-oriented man. Meanwhile, in secret, he continued to see KLA, despite knowing her feelings and Alyssa's suspicions. Every time Felix promised to end his relationship with Keisha, he would tearfully make those vows, but he remained entangled. Keisha, who had loved Felix since high school, refused to let go and continued to love him, despite the pain. She was devoted to animal care, working at a veterinarian aesthetics center, and her colleagues described her as compassionate and dedicated. Yet, her true love for Felix kept her yearning for a different life, even as their romance remained shadowed by secrets and heartbreak. In 2020, Elisa was known for her conscientiousness, diligent work ethic, and unwavering sense of responsibility. She shared her life with 2 dogs and a beloved cat, finding joy in their companionship. That year, she uncovered troubling evidence: her husband's correspondence with several women, including one named Clara. This revelation sparked a heated argument, leading her to throw him out of the house and threaten to divorce him, warning she would also block his access to their daughter. Her threats stirred a reaction, but the situation was complicated by her husband's declining athletic career and mounting personal troubles, which caused him to temporarily cease contact with their daughter Rodriguez. Despite the distance, Felix refused to fully let her go, attempting to control her every move. After several months of clandestine visits, Clara discovered she was pregnant in April of 2021. She bought a quick test kit, which confirmed her fears, prompting her to confide in her sister, who was aware of the complicated relationship. Determined not to terminate the pregnancy, Clara, at age 27, decided to raise the child independently if necessary. A few days later, she shared the news with Felix, the father, hoping for his acceptance. However, his response was far from supportive. Felix grew angry, insisting she see a doctor to confirm her pregnancy and consider an abortion. Clara refused outright, and Felix's anger deepened into threats. He argued that an illegitimate child would ruin his reputation, making it impossible for him to accept responsibility. Clara soon obtained a medical certificate confirming her pregnancy, which she shared with Felix. His fury intensified. He demanded she terminate the pregnancy immediately. She stood firm, refusing once more. Felix then devised a plan to secretly verify her claims. He scheduled a clandestine meeting with Clara in a busy public place, aiming to avoid drawing attention, as they always kept their dealings discreet. A few days prior, Felix visited an old friend, Luis Antonio, who worked in a local machine shop and had ties to illegal circles. Felix briefed him on the situation and sought help to remove Clara's pregnancy. Luis, previously on law enforcement's radar and fearing imprisonment, hesitated at first but was persuaded by Felix's promises of a substantial cash reward. The boxer assured him that they would not leave any trace for the police. Felix then contacted Clara to arrange the meeting for the evening of April 29th, intending to confirm her pregnancy and decide on their next steps. After speaking with her lover, Clara quickly made the call to coordinate their plans. Her sister returned and shared all the latest news, still holding on to hope that Felix would accept her child and avoid insisting on an abortion. However, Beryl was increasingly alarmed by the dire situation, especially knowing that her sister's boyfriend had threatened her. Fearing for her safety, she contacted her mother to express her concerns, but even together, they couldn't dissuade her from attending the scheduled encounter. On the appointed day, Rodriguez, armed with a doctor's note, arrived in her own Kia Forte, while Vero drove there in a pickup truck, with Luis hiding in the back. Keisha immediately entered the athlete's vehicle, showing him test results and once again refusing the termination. Amid her tears, she firmly declined, prompting a heated argument that quickly escalated into shouting. Suddenly, Felix struck Keisha's head with his fist, causing her to instantly lose consciousness. While she was unconscious, Felix retrieved a syringe with a large dose of illegal substances from the glove box, an item Luis had supplied, and injected her. Together, they then carried her to the back of the vehicle, where prepared wire and a concrete block awaited. The men bound her securely, attached the heavy load, and covered her with a tarp to conceal any signs of the crime. Felix promptly returned to his pickup truck, while his accomplice took the wheel of Keisha's car. The two then drove to the bridge over San Jose Lagoon, a quiet spot at night. Ensuring no one could see, they pushed her into the water. Afterward, To eliminate any chance of survivors, they fired a few test shots with the firearms they had brought, making sure the scene was thoroughly covered. Once the crime was complete, each returned home. The next day, Keisha's colleagues became concerned when she failed to show up at the Veterinary Medicine and Aesthetics Center. Usually responsible, she never missed work without notifying anyone. When her phone went unanswered, they decided to reach out to her sister. After multiple failed attempts to contact her, they visited her house. Finding no one at the door, they used a spare key that Beryl had and entered. The scene was distressing. The house was filled with hungry animals that had gone nearly a day without food. Realizing something terrible had happened, Beryl panicked, immediately calling her mother and informing her of the situation, then reporting her suspicions and threats to the authorities. She also contacted Felix, but he claimed to have spent the previous evening and night at home with his family, denying any involvement in the meeting. Keisha's mother, overwhelmed with worry, took the earliest flight from Florida to San W, determined to find her daughter and uncover the truth. The case began with the troubling disappearance of a young woman whose family initially turned to a private clinic to have an abortion, done without her consent. The family was overwhelmed by the loss of Kaya and focused on uncovering what happened. The first step involved questioning her neighbors and colleagues, but they reported no suspicious activity, nor any useful information. Meanwhile, social media was flooded with posts about the missing girl, urging anyone with knowledge of her fate to come forward. The story quickly gained public attention, especially after it was revealed that she was in a long-term relationship with a well-known athlete and was expecting his child. As a result, reporters eagerly sought interviews with her relatives, who spoke openly about their suspicions, even blaming Felix for her disappearance. On April 30th, Kaya's vehicle was discovered abandoned on the city's eastern outskirts, with her identification and personal belongings inside. The interior showed no signs of a struggle, offering a faint hope that she might still be alive. The following day, a passerby on the bridge spanning the lagoon noticed an unfamiliar shape in the shallow water, something resembling a human form. Police retrieved a body, presumed to be the missing girl, after a brief search. Her family arrived at the scene, desperately praying it was not Kaya, but visual identification was immediate, clear enough to recognize her distinctive tattoo on her arm. The water's effect had altered her appearance over several days, yet the tattoo was distinctive. When news of the grim discovery broke, the community erupted into protests demanding justice. That same day, Vero was detained and brought in for questioning. Felix, the athlete, vehemently denied any involvement, asserting that he had been with his family at home on the night Kaya disappeared. Since there was no concrete evidence against him, he was released under his own recognizance. One key witness was Felix's legal wife, who admitted knowing about his affair with Kaya and that she had only just learned about her pregnancy. She also refused to confirm her husband's alibi, claiming he was not at home the night Kaya vanished. Investigators soon reviewed traffic surveillance footage on the route to the bridge, which revealed Felix's pickup truck and Kaya's car traveling closely behind. However, the vehicle found at the scene did not belong to Kaya. On the same day, her car was seized for examination, and some hair belonging to the victim was recovered from the vehicle. Luis, another individual connected to the case, was among the first to surrender to the police, promising honesty in exchange for cooperation. Felix was taken into custody but refused to cooperate, declining to answer questions or admit guilt, despite overwhelming evidence. Authorities recovered a firearm from Felix, which he had used to shoot the victim from a bridge. Notably, he held an official permit for this weapon. A thorough examination of his phone confirmed that Felix, Luis, and Keisha had been together at the scene on that critical night. Keisha's last farewell took place on May 8th, and her funeral attracted nationwide attention. The event served both as a tribute to her memory and as a call for justice, urging authorities to impose the full extent of the law on those responsible, or, as a symbol of mourning, her coffin was transported to the cemetery in a white carriage, decorated with white flower petals softly falling from above. Many prominent Puerto Rican figures, including celebrities, athletes, politicians, and public personalities, voiced their opinions on the high-profile case. Vero faced multiple charges: carjacking, kidnapping, premeditated murder, and the killing of an unborn child, all carrying the possibility of the death penalty. However, her family requested the court to impose a sentence of life imprisonment, seeking her suffering to continue behind bars for life. The ongoing pandemic caused repeated delays in the trial, but by spring of 2021, proceedings were conducted virtually. The court determined that the crime involved a conspiracy executed with particular brutality against a pregnant woman. Reconstruction of the events relied heavily on Luis's testimony, who did not deny his involvement. He confessed to obtaining the drug used for injection, as well as bringing the wire and concrete block intended to conceal the victim's body. Felix, however, maintained his innocence, though his claims failed to significantly influence the case. Almost immediately after her husband's arrest, his wife filed for divorce, choosing to focus on her business and raising their young daughter. Recent reports indicate that Elisa Santiago remarried, and in an interview she revealed receiving anonymous threats and messages of harm, some even involving her relatives. Speculation arose that her spouse might have organized the crime, but no concrete evidence supported this theory. By summer of 2023, after reviewing all evidence and testimony, the jury was prepared to deliver its verdict. Felix, Vero, and their accomplice, Luis, were ultimately found guilty of all charges. Despite ongoing legal procedures, the killers have yet to be sentenced. Their next court appearance is scheduled for mid-November 2023, and it is widely anticipated that both individuals involved in the deaths of Keisha Rodriguez and her unborn child will face life imprisonment without the possibility of release. The case dates back to early July of 1985, when 54-year-old Jane Anchor Hilton was found brutally assaulted and stabbed in a bedroom at her employer's residence, a house she had moved into just the day before, seeking refuge from a troubled marriage. She was discovered by two housemates and her own daughter, Autumn. The motives behind the killing appeared unclear, and the investigation stalled, dragging on for 14 years. In 1999, two detectives reopened the cold case. A mistaken quote in a news article led investigators to suspect Ricky Davis, who was eventually tried and convicted of the crime, despite maintaining his innocence. He refused to give up hope, seeking help from the justice system that had imprisoned him. 15 years later, genetic genealogy testing, combined with efforts by the Innocence Project, proved Davis's innocence. The real perpetrator was finally identified, bringing a resolution to the long-standing case. Jane was well known in El Dorado Hills, California, where she contributed as a columnist for the Foothill Times, frequently covering local social events. She cherished her 6 children and often expressed her love through poetry aimed at inspiring them daily. In 1984, she was working toward obtaining her real estate license and had been married to Archie Hilton. By mid-1985, their marriage was unraveling. At that difficult time, Jane sought assistance from her employer, Will Nealon. Memline owned a sizable property in El Dorado Hills where her daughter Maureen, her grandson Wilma, and his girlfriend Connie Dahl also resided. On July 6, 1985, Wilma welcomed Jane and her 13-year-old daughter Autumn into her home. Tragically, the very first night in her new environment, at around 3:30 in the morning, Jane's life was violently taken. At age 20, Ricky Davis and his 19-year-old girlfriend, Connie Dahl, returned from a social gathering to find Autumn lingering outside their home. Concerned she might be worried about her mother's possible anger, they all entered the house together. Inside, a chilling sight greeted them, a trail of blood in the hallway leading into the first room, Ricky's mother's bedroom. There, on the bed, lay the lifeless body of Jane Hilton, brutally assaulted with numerous stab wounds, her face battered and her shoulder bitten. She was unresponsive, and despite efforts to revive her, she had already succumbed. The incident seemed senseless, and investigators quickly began their inquiries. Jane had been living with her estranged husband, Archie Hilton, who was away camping with friends at the time. When questioned, Archie provided an alibi and DNA samples, and since he had been experiencing marital difficulties but maintained their marriage was still intact, he was largely cleared as a suspect. Meanwhile, Ricky and Connie told authorities they returned home in the early hours, finding Autumn waiting outside, and upon entering, they discovered the bloody trail leading to the master bedroom, where Jane's body lay on her bed. Police initially suspected that an intruder might be responsible. For 14 years, the case languished as an unsolved mystery. Then, in 1999, it was reopened. Detectives Richard Strausser and Rick Fitzgerald revisited the case, scrutinizing old files. They paid particular attention to a recent interview with Connie Dahl, who had been Jane Hilton's housemaid and Ricky's former girlfriend. During a televised interview, Dahl described Jane's body as lying in bed, as if placed there naturally. This statement conflicted with an audio recording of a prior confession in which Ricky had suggested the body was on the floor. At the time, Connie was incarcerated in Oregon on unrelated charges. Detectives brought Connie in for questioning, initiating a lengthy 3-hour interview. Although she initially maintained her innocence, her recounting gradually shifted over the next 18 months, during which she was interrogated 4 more times. Investigators used questionable techniques likely to produce false confessions, coercing her into implicating Ricky and Autumn in the crime, threatening her with murder charges if she did not cooperate, and promising leniency if she cooperated, namely, a reduced sentence of manslaughter and only 1 year in prison. Despite these tactics, no DNA evidence linking her directly to the scene was presented at that time. In fact, DNA testing relevant to the case had not yet been conducted. As the investigation progressed, authorities relied heavily on flawed confessions and inconsistent statements, neglecting the fact that crucial forensic analysis was still pending. The case was deeply entangled in inaccuracies and false leads, highlighting the importance of proper evidence handling and reliable interrogation methods in solving such violent crimes. Following the investigation into the crime scene, investigators quickly picked up on clues, such as the distinctive bike mark on Jane's shoulder, which helped piece together what happened. Over the course of 4 interviews, the young woman initially provided fragmented details, but gradually began to recall facts more clearly. This process enabled her to construct a new, more detailed account of the events on the night of the incident. In one account, she claimed that Autumn was present during the altercation and was splattered with blood. In another, she suggested Autumn might have been the one who bit Jane's shoulder. Her version of events often shifted, reflecting the information she was fed, yet she struggled to remember specific details, like the weapon used or its hiding place. She ultimately accused her former partner, Davis, of being involved in Jane's passing. She described a confrontation that supposedly started when Davis wanted Autumn to join a party, but Jane refused. According to her, Davis's anger then spiraled out of control, resulting in Jane's death. However, her story kept changing in an attempt to align with the evidence, and she was unable to recall the weapon or its whereabouts. Her testimony implicated Davis heavily in the incident. Both Davis and Autumn Anchor were questioned after her confession, and initially they maintained their original versions of the events. When detectives suggested that Autumn might have also implicated Davis, both kept their stories unchanged despite intense pressure. Autumn insisted she had no reason to protect Davis, even when threatened with potential suspicion herself. In the end, investigators relied on her false confession to make an arrest. Davis was offered a plea deal to testify against him in court. His first trial ended in a hung jury, but a second trial in 2005 resulted in a conviction. During the proceeding, Doe took the stand, recounting her struggle with Jane and admitting that she had unintentionally bitten her shoulder. She testified that she had exited the scene while Davis continued the attack, listening to screams and pleas as he inflicted the blows. Based solely on Doe's testimony, Davis was sentenced to 16 years for second-degree homicide. He received a lesser charge, manslaughter, and served a year in county jail. Unfortunately, Doe later succumbed to a drug overdose in 2014. Davis, however, maintained his innocence and in 2006 reached out to the Northern California Innocence Project, seeking help to overturn what he believed was a wrongful conviction. Founded in 2001 by Kathleen Rudolph and Westar, the nonprofit organization was established after legislation allowed convicted individuals to request DNA testing to verify their guilt or innocence. As part of a legal clinic affiliated with Santa Clara University School of Law, the NCP initiated a comprehensive review of Davis's case, collaborating with the El Dorado County District Attorney's Office to recover and analyze DNA evidence that could prove his innocence. Following a thorough re-examination of evidence from the crime scene, authorities retested materials presented during the original conviction. Among these were Hilton's nightgown and biological traces found beneath her fingernails. The laboratory results uncovered a previously unknown male DNA profile, which matched both Hilton's fingernail debris and her nightwear, indicating a common source. This crucial discovery challenged the credibility of eyewitness testimony provided by Davis Dahl, whose statements conflicted with physical evidence, suggesting his account had been fabricated. The DNA evidence ultimately confirmed Archie Hilton's innocence. However, he had passed away before the results were made public. The DNA profile was entered into the FBI's combined DNA index system, but no matches were returned. While this evidence strongly supported Davis Dahl's claims of innocence, certain legal hurdles remained. The case's advocates argued that if this DNA evidence had been introduced during Davis's original trial, the verdict might have been different. Until January of 2017, California law mandated that new evidence must unequivocally establish innocence, a nearly impossible standard. In 2015, DNA expert Richard Leo reviewed Dahl's interrogation transcripts and concluded that detectives employed coercive techniques aiming to manipulate Dahl into corroborating a narrative aligned with their assumptions about Hilton's murder. Recognizing the need for legal reform, the California State Senate sponsored legislation, Senate Bill 113-134, in 2016, enabling wrongfully convicted individuals like Davis to present new evidence likely to influence jury decisions. Attorney Melissa, representing the defendant, petitioned for a new trial based on this emerging DNA evidence, supported by the efforts of former State Senator Mar Leno. The legislation's passage in January of 2017 aligned California's standards with those of 43 other states. In 2019, Superior Court Judge Kenneth Malachi vacated Davis Dahl's 2005 conviction and ordered a new trial. The trial was initially scheduled for fall of 2019 but was postponed to April of the following year due to the defense attorney's health. Just as the trial drew near, breakthroughs in DNA technology once again reshaped the case. Advances in genetic genealogy allowed authorities to identify a new suspect, making Davis Dahl the first wrongful conviction exonerated in California through this method and the second nationwide. This technique involves comparing crime scene DNA with large family tree databases maintained by genetic testing firms. In February of 2020, the DNA evidence was matched to a man long believed to be an unlikely offender. El Dorado County's District Attorney Vern Pearson revealed the arrest of a man connected to Hilton's biological traces, known publicly as Michael Green, a longtime resident of Roseville, California. In 1986, he graduated from Oakmount High School, where he was described as a calm, easygoing individual with a steady temperament and a notably relaxed demeanor. One classmate, choosing to remain anonymous, struggled to understand why Green would travel to El Dorado Hills and commit such a violent act against a woman. According to reports, Green was merely 17 years old at the time of Hilton's death. On the night of July 6, 1985, Autumn, the victim's daughter, met Green along with two friends, Calvin and Stephen, and they spent time together at a local park. When Autumn decided to return home to freshen up before heading back out, she allegedly told her mother she was going to visit another friend's house. Instead, she went back to join the boys. What occurred afterward remains based mainly on speculation, but investigators believe Green forced his way into the victim's home. Confronted by Jane, a struggle ensued, and during this confrontation, Green may have attacked her in a frenzy. The following morning, Autumn and Davis D. discovered Jane's body upon returning home. At the time, Green had no criminal record, either before or after that tragic event. It appeared he was leading a normal life until DNA evidence connected him to the crime scene, providing crucial proof of his involvement. The other two boys present with Green, Calvin and Stephen, were located soon after Green's arrest. Sadly, Calvin had passed away some years earlier. Stephen was also traced and interviewed. After his testimony, he was considered a witness rather than a suspect. Green was taken into custody on February 11, 2020. Because he was a minor at the time of the crime, he first appeared in juvenile court on February 19th of that year. District Attorney Vern Pearson explained that the legal process on the juvenile side required certain procedural steps, after which Green was transferred to adult court to face trial. Green waited approximately 2.5 years before standing trial. On July 29, 2022, he entered a plea of no contest, abandoning his right to a jury trial. This plea also meant he accepted the charges of first-degree involvement without contesting the facts or the consequences. His sentencing was scheduled for September 27, overseen by Judge Suzanne Kingsbury. Ahead of sentencing, Dr. Elizabeth Kaufman, a psychologist specializing in adolescent development, was called to explain the emotional and cognitive growth stages typical during teenage years. Her research highlighted that late adolescence allows a person to understand morality, yet still involves diminished impulse control, often affecting decision-making. During the trial, several witnesses from Green's childhood, some of whom maintained connections with him into adulthood, testified. Each was asked whether their opinion of Green had changed since learning about his confession. All expressed shock and disappointment, having previously viewed him in a different light, unaware of his involvement in the tragic event. Green was once described as jovial, popular, humorous, and affectionate, words that seemed fitting both before and after the tragic events. Following the testimony of witnesses, his ex-wife Karen Green recounted how each of Jane Hilton's children delivered powerful victim impact statements, expressing the profound and unforgivable loss that Green had caused their family. She shared her emotional experience of collecting her mother's belongings from the home where Jane had been taken from them, concluding with a resolute statement about the pain inflicted. Ian, Hilton's son, echoed his sister's sentiments, describing the ongoing uncertainty and recurring nightmares that haunted them. His voice broke as he mentioned the false blame that had been directed at his sister Autumn. His words revealed the deep torment they endured, especially after suggestions of her involvement surfaced. Autumn, the youngest, spoke last, and her account was filled with raw anguish. She recounted the suspicion that had shadowed her family for nearly 20 years, recalling the day two stern detectives entered her house, accusing her of helping move her mother's body and of biting Jane during a struggle. Her recounting detailed the relentless intimidation tactics, which extended to her being pressed and questioned multiple times, leaving her overwhelmed and frightened. She expressed that if she hadn't requested legal counsel, the investigators' tactics might have become even more oppressive. Later, Deputy District Attorney Jay Linden read a statement representing the family, asking Green why he had committed such a violent act against Jane. He pointed out the extensive injuries Jane had sustained around her head and face, emphasizing that Green himself had admitted to kicking her jaw and biting her shoulder. Linden highlighted that Green's actions not only ended Jane's life, but also shattered the lives of everyone close to her. He then asked Green to reflect on Jane's character, her achievements, and the love she had for her children, painting a vivid picture of the woman who had been taken from them. In a closing defense argument, Margaret Husher, Green's attorney, argued that her client was unable to control himself, suggesting that he lacked awareness of the wrongfulness of his actions due to his youth at the time. She relied on the testimony of expert witness Dr. Kaufman, claiming that Green's young age impaired his judgment. She urged the court for leniency, emphasizing the potential for mercy. However, Judge Kingsbury interrupted, firmly stating that probation would not be granted in this case, effectively ending any further defense remarks. In response, Linden expressed outrage at the suggestion of probation, calling it an insult to the family's decades of suffering. He contrasted the long mercy shown to Green, who had seemingly escaped justice for 37 years, with the notion that probation would amount to letting him go free again. Judge Kingsbury reflected on the case's gravity, noting that after 26 years on the bench, she considered Hilton's murder to be among the most brutal she had encountered, thanks to its severity and the youth of the perpetrator. In her sentencing remarks, Kingsbury expressed remorse to the family for the trauma they endured, emphasizing her hope that they could find healing in accordance with their mother's wishes. Although she was not originally assigned to the case, she extended her condolences, understanding the importance of acknowledging their pain. Kingsbury then advised Green to utilize all available resources through the California Department of Rehabilitation, highlighting that such efforts could influence the outcome of his parole prospects. She underscored that engaging fully with support systems might provide answers to his questions and aid in his rehabilitation. In her closing remarks, Kingsbury shared that she had received positive impressions from Green's friends about his potential to contribute meaningfully if granted the chance. She pointed out that his youth made him a suitable candidate for release and the opportunity to lead a productive life. Green received a sentence of 15 years to life and is currently incarcerated at El Dorado County Jail, with plans for his transfer to the California Department of Rehabilitation. The court will later determine restitution based on further evaluations. Meanwhile, Davis was released on February 13, 2020, and planned to celebrate with his family over pizza. His attorney, Melissa O'Connell, stated that he was entitled to over $750,000 in state compensation for wrongful conviction, a substantial sum that could help him reintegrate into society. However, she noted that no amount of money could compensate for the years of lost freedom. Davis subsequently filed a lawsuit against the state seeking damages of $18 million for the period spanning from May 21, 2002 to his release. The suit names El Dorado County former detectives Richard Stracer, Rick Fitzgerald, and Bill Wilson, who has since passed away and is being sued through his estate, and Larry Hennig of the Sheriff's Office. Additionally, pathologist Dr. Robert Anthony has been included in the complaint. Following his release, local reports indicated Davis was homeless, and as of 2022, the legal action remained ongoing. In September of 2022, California passed Assembly Bill 2664, set to take effect from January 1, 2024. This legislation prohibits law enforcement officers from using threats, physical harm, deception, or psychological manipulation during custodial interrogations of individuals aged 17 or younger. Although the bill faced opposition, District Attorney Van Pearson advocates for an end to such coercive tactics, citing that 10 years ago, he might have viewed these methods differently. However, witnessing their damaging effects has prompted him to support reform. Evidence suggests that law enforcement has long relied on manipulative techniques aimed at presuming guilt and securing confessions at the expense of uncovering the full truth. Consequently, Pearson is implementing new policies within his office and encourages other districts to follow suit. The El Dorado County District Attorney's Office will now dismiss cases where the primary evidence relies solely on confessions obtained through threats, lies, or psychological pressure, aiming to prevent future wrongful convictions rooted in coercive interrogation methods. The case of Ricky Davis, who was wrongfully convicted due to a coerced confession, exemplifies the profound consequences of flawed justice. Pearson, the man convicted, later extended a personal apology to those impacted by the miscarriage of justice, which stemmed from aggressive tactics used by investigators in the brutal 1985 murder of Jane Hilton. After nearly 4 decades, the true perpetrator has finally been brought to justice, yet the damage inflicted on many lives remains. Families torn apart by wrongful accusations now face the challenge of healing, especially Jane Hilton's loved ones, who are left to rebuild what was shattered by doubt and falsehoods. Meanwhile, Ricky Davis faces a reality from which he cannot recover the freedom and stability he once had, and Michael Green's actions not only destroyed the victim's relatives, but also altered the lives he touched before and after the crime. His bias and misconduct raise questions about the fairness of his punishment. Did his clean record prior to the incident imply innocence of deliberate wrongdoing, Or was justice properly served? How could he allow an innocent man to bear responsibility? Even with potential compensation, Ricky Davis's path to reconciliation remains uncertain, and the length of the legal process only deepens this uncertainty. Shifting to a different case, the tragic story of Matthew Winkler exposes how disastrous secrets can lurk beneath the facade of a seemingly idyllic family. The Winklers, residents of Selmer, Tennessee, were considered a model family. A devoted pastor, his wife, and their 3 daughters. Their life appeared prosperous. They seemed happy, healthy, and successful. Yet, beneath this veneer, unsettling questions persisted because only one side of the story was known. This silence led to the shocking events of March 22, 2006, when Matthew Winkler was found murdered inside his own home. On that day, the community was stunned as no one understood why the pastor had failed to attend the evening service with his family, a routine that was never missed. The absence of his wife Mary and their daughters, Patricia, Maria Eliza, and young Brianna, who vanished without a trace, only heightened suspicion. The residents showed no signs of forced entry or struggle. The windows and doors were intact, and the household appeared normal. Lights on and the television blaring in an open room, giving no hint of trouble. Despite these clues, official explanations were limited, and many questions remained unanswered, fueling speculation and concern throughout the town. These cases highlight how appearances can deceive and underscore the devastating impact when truth is obscured within familiar settings. Whether through wrongful convictions rooted in misconduct or families hiding dark secrets behind a perfect facade, the real stories often lie beneath the surface, waiting to be uncovered. On the day of the incident, phone calls went unanswered and the windows were tightly curtained, making it impossible to see inside or determine if anyone was present. Despite the unusual circumstances, no one hurried to contact authorities. Instead, someone called an elder from their religious community. The elder advised them to search for a spare key and attempt to open the door themselves. It took about an hour and a half before the community members succeeded in entering the house. Once inside, the scene was unsettling yet perplexingly normal. Everything appeared in its place with no signs of forced entry or intrusion. The residents, however, were nowhere to be found. The rooms looked ordinary until they reached the marital bedroom, where a disturbing sight awaited them. There on the floor lay the pastor's body, sprawled in a pool of blood from a gunshot wound in his back. A large exit hole indicated the fatal shot. Blood was splattered across the room, and dried foam covered his face. By then, the body had cooled and stiffened, suggesting he had been lying there for hours, likely since morning, as he was dressed in pajamas. Only after discovering the body did someone call the police. By the time officers arrived, a crowd of neighbors, church members, and curious passers-by had gathered, trying to understand what was happening. Their presence contaminated the scene. Many left fingerprints and shoe prints, potentially compromising evidence, as footprints had been trampled wherever they had stepped, further hampering investigators' efforts. Forensic experts confirmed the cause of death. A single bullet had struck the pastor from behind with a large-caliber firearm. He succumbed quickly from severe blood loss, unable to call for help. It remained impossible to determine whether any strangers had been in the house at the time, given that the early visitors had inadvertently erased or disturbed any signs of intrusion. The crime scene itself was strange, and witnesses with valuable insights disappeared after the tragedy. The fate of the pastor's wife and daughters remained unknown. Authorities suspected they might have been abducted or worse. Additionally, the family's minivan was missing from the garage, prompting a massive search effort. A public alert was issued indicating that children might have gone missing, and citizens were urged to stay vigilant and support the investigation. To understand what led to this tragedy, it's important to note that Matthew Brian Winkler was born on the 21st of November in 1974 in the charming town of Henderson, Tennessee. As the youngest of 3 sons in a devout Christian family, his upbringing was marked by strict discipline enforced by parents who prioritized religious obedience. His older brothers were James and Daniel. Matthew's family tree traced back several generations of ministers. His heritage included a great-uncle and grandfather who served in ecclesiastical roles, shaping his path toward becoming a minister himself in the fifth generation. Father Wendell, along with his ancestors Merlin Winkler and Merlin Paul Winkler Sr., all dedicated their lives to spreading the gospel, with the elder father running the local preacher's school and earning respect and influence in their community. In their youth, the Winkler brothers actively participated in Sunday school and church activities, forming a deep connection to their faith. Meanwhile, Matthew showed a keen interest in soccer during his high school years, and his talent on the field was widely recognized as potentially leading to an international athletic career. However, he chose instead to focus on studying the Bible and pursuing a calling in church ministry, sacrificing his athletic aspirations. Due to his father's frequent travels related to preaching, Matthew's family moved several times during his childhood. Despite the constant change, he quickly adapted, making friends easily thanks to his friendly and outgoing nature. At the time of his high school graduation, the family resided in Austin, Texas. Matthew was a naturally creative and charismatic individual, yet he didn't boast significant academic achievements. After finishing high school, he enrolled at Freed-Hardeman College, completing his studies successfully. Guided by his father, he began to explore pastoral work, serving as a youth minister at the Central Church of Christ in McMinnville. Later, he was appointed to preach at the 4th Street Church of Christ in Selmer, Tennessee. Mary Carol Winkler, born in December 1973 in G Township, Tennessee, was the oldest of 2 daughters in a devout family. Her father had long served as a pastor in the Christian church, and Mary was raised under strict religious discipline. A second sister, Patricia, was born prematurely, suffering from serious health issues including cerebral palsy, epilepsy, and intellectual disabilities. Her parents, initially hopeful for recovery, tried various treatments, including experimental therapies, but without significant success. Mary cared deeply for her younger sister, showing love and tenderness despite her own struggles. In 1987, when Mary was 10 years old, she was bathing her sister Patricia when the girl had a sudden epileptic seizure. Mary had briefly left the room to gather bath accessories. When she returned, Patricia was no longer breathing, and all efforts to revive her failed. This tragic event shocked Mary profoundly, marking her first encounter with loss. She blamed herself for the tragedy and nearly suffered a nervous breakdown, grappling with the weight of her grief and feelings of guilt. Several teachers, witnessing Mary's troubling condition, directed her to a school psychologist for support. Although she found some help there, her father soon discovered and reacted angrily, forbidding her from attending sessions. He insisted that such issues should be addressed solely within the family, leaving Mary without genuine emotional support. Growing up modest and shy, she avoided conflicts and after her younger sister's tragic passing withdrew further. Her father's opposition to seeking professional help compounded her trauma, leading to deep-seated psychological struggles over the years. Following Patricia's loss, her parents decided to adopt Charlotte from a troubled, large family. Soon they were granted custody of her 2 siblings as well, reuniting the family under one roof. Mary, now the older sister, took on the role of caregiver for the younger children while supporting her mother. Matthew and Mary met shortly after Matthew finished high school. He was handsome, athletic, and popular among peers, living without strict religious constraints. Their mutual affection quickly turned into love, and within a few months they introduced their families. After receiving parental approval, they began planning their wedding, which took place in April of 1994. At that time, the family also included an older daughter named Patricia. During his college years, Matthew worked at a construction site to support himself, but soon realized that physical labor was not for him. His temper proved to be a challenge. He often became irritable over minor issues and struggled to control his anger. Despite this, Mary remained silent about her family's difficulties, guided by her upbringing in a traditional, obedient environment. She admired her husband and submitted to his authority, unaware of the full extent of his temper. Initially residing near Mary's parents, the Winkler family maintained close ties. However, their life was disrupted when Mrs. Freeman, Mary's mother, was diagnosed with aggressive cancer. Her rapid decline and passing deeply impacted the family. As Mary grieved, she also assumed full responsibility for her underage siblings, which was intensified by her pregnancy at the time. Soon after the birth of their second daughter, the family moved to a new city and bought a modest house. The move shifted Mary's focus entirely to caring for the newborn, causing her to retreat further from her parents and younger siblings who continued to demand constant attention. A young mother started experiencing severe postpartum depression, and those close to the Winkler family noticed some oddities in Mary's behavior. She was described as highly reserved, almost averse to social interaction, finding it difficult to initiate new relationships or friendships. Her mood swings and tendency toward melancholy meant that even minor stressors could leave her in tears. While her husband Matthew was busy establishing a career as a pastor, Mary withdrew increasingly into herself. The situation worsened when she became pregnant again, only to find out that her fetus had died in the womb. This devastating news profoundly shook her, especially since she had eagerly anticipated welcoming a new child and dreamed of a lively, loving family. It took her nearly 2 years to see the 2 faint lines on a pregnancy test again, and her happiness knew no bounds. However, she kept her pregnancy a secret for a long time, seemingly afraid of revealing her fears and anxieties until her condition became more obvious. As her strange behavior grew more noticeable, rumors started circulating. Mary's withdrawal was linked not just to the trauma of her childhood, but also to an unhealthy family environment that further destabilized her fragile mental state. Inside their home, her family life was far from ideal. The family patriarch was a man of authority who demanded complete obedience, yet behind the closed doors, neighbors often overheard him shouting at his wife for no apparent reason. Nobody could imagine that the respected pastor might mistreat his wife. But one day, Mary appeared with a large bruise around her eye. Despite her denial, claiming it was an accident, persistent rumors spread throughout the community, casting suspicion on her husband's temper. Adding to the tension, Matthew developed an unsettling interest in experimenting with their intimacy, suggesting role-playing and introducing adult toys. For Mary, raised in a strict conservative household, these ideas were unacceptable. She attempted to limit her husband's advances, but as frustration grew, he repeatedly tried to force his desires, leading to episodes of abuse which deeply traumatized her. One day, distraught and overwhelmed, Mary confided in her only close friend about her ordeal. The friend promised to keep her secret, but soon betrayed her, spreading gossip about the pastor's unacceptable behavior. These rumors impacted Matthew's career prospects. At a time when he aspired to a higher position within the church, the spreading accusations led to his rejection for promotion. Additionally, he was removed from his role in the local Sunday school, further damaging his reputation. Once regarded as a respected family, the Winklers faced a series of challenging circumstances that prompted them to seek a fresh start in a different town. Responding to concerns raised by their community and questions about their peculiar behaviors, they relocated to Selmer. There, they quickly earned admiration and trust from neighbors and church members alike. Matthew resumed his role as a church pastor, while his wife took on a part-time position to contribute to the household income. Despite ongoing personal struggles, others viewed them as an ideal couple whose family embodied harmony and virtue. Next door to the Winklers lived a young married couple with whom they soon forged a close friendship. The two families often enjoyed shared visits, holiday celebrations, and exchanged news and confidences. Several months before the tragic event, during a gathering at the pastor's home, Mary proudly revealed that Matthew had bought her a firearm for self-defense and taken her shooting to learn proper handling. She demonstrated notable skill, mastering the basics quickly and hitting targets with accuracy. It also turned out that the Winklers already possessed firearms purchased earlier by Matthew for protection. The neighbors questioned the necessity of such preparedness, given the small, peaceful town where everyone respected the family. Following another move to improve their financial situation, Mary sought various part-time jobs and decided to pursue medical studies, aiming to work in a clinic caring for children. However, in her efforts to boost their household income, she later admitted to engaging in financial misrepresentation. She claimed ignorance of criminality, intending to repay all stolen funds when she was back on her feet. The scheme involved artificially inflating account balances, a common form of financial deception. Mary also received checks from unknown sources, depositing nearly $117,000 into their shared bank account. She changed the account address so all bank correspondence would be directed there. Suspicious bank employees, noticing irregularities, called the couple in for questioning. Yet, Matthew and Mary failed to appear, heightening their suspicion. It was believed that Matthew remained unaware of his wife's activities altogether. After Matthew's death, however, Mary attempted to convince a court that he was behind the fraud, asserting that he had coerced her into making dubious transactions while he himself stayed in the shadows, avoiding suspicion. Following the discovery of Mr. Winkler's death in his home, his wife and daughters became the primary subjects of an urgent search, as authorities feared they might be in immediate danger. Initially, the shy and unassuming Mary was seen merely as a possible victim, but new evidence soon cast her into the spotlight as the main suspect. Information from neighbors and bank records indicating financial deception pointed towards her, prompting the authorities to act swiftly. Their goal was to locate Mary and her children, determine their safety, and recover their vehicle. Law enforcement efforts included tracking expenses on her bank card and analyzing phone signals to pinpoint her whereabouts. Remarkably, Mary was found just a day later in an Alabama resort town, where she and her daughters enjoyed themselves at an amusement park, almost as if she was trying to give her children a last moment of happiness before confronting the consequences of her actions. When the family was brought in for questioning, the older daughters confidently recounted how intruders had broken into their home, harmed their father, and that their mother had grabbed a firearm in a desperate attempt to protect them. They believed their father was alive in a hospital and that they would soon see him again. However, the girls had only heard gunfire and glimpsed their father sprawled on the floor. Most of what they knew came from their mother's account. The children remembered her hurriedly placing them in the car before driving away. Mary initially attempted to confess, but she claimed her memory of the events was hazy, describing her recollections as temporarily unclear. She insisted that her marriage had been marred by long-term abuse and humiliation. According to her, her husband was the one responsible for initiating an elaborate financial scam, and he often lost his temper violently. This was corroborated by a former secretary who had witnessed his abusive behavior, criticizing his wife despite her efforts to bring him meals at church. The day before the tragedy, the couple hadens an argument that led her to sleep separately. Early the next morning, Mary found herself holding her husband's loaded shotgun. She entered his room as he lay in bed, and in a moment of despair, she fired, hitting him in the back. As he lay bleeding, he murmured, "Why?" to which she responded with an apology. The aftermath showed her taking her daughters and leaving the scene, a decision that, according to experts, reflected her tumultuous emotional state at the time. In 2016, a tragic incident unfolded that revealed the terrifying depths of domestic violence and its tragic consequences. The victim, overwhelmed by years of anger, resentment, and emotional abuse, attempted to reach for her phone in a desperate bid to call for help, but exhaustion and fear rendered her unable to do so. The evidence uncovered showed that the weapon used in the incident was hidden in the trunk of the car from which Mary had driven away with her children earlier that day. The reasons behind her decision to take the weapon with her remained unclear. During the trial, the presence of role-playing costumes found at their home was presented as evidence of the pastor's humiliating and morally damaging treatment of his wife. Upon seeing these items, Mary became visibly pale and eventually broke into hysteria. Despite her confusing and inconsistent testimonies, the court recognized her as a victim of a domestic tyrant and concluded that years of pent-up anger and pain had culminated in her actions. Nevertheless, she was held partly responsible for her involvement. In April 2007, the court delivered its final ruling in this complex case. Mary Winkler was convicted of involuntary manslaughter, yet her mental state raised many questions. Initially, it was anticipated she would serve at least 6 years in prison, but she was ultimately sentenced to less than 1 year. During her incarceration, she spent 2 months in a psychiatric hospital where experts assessed her mental health and the possibility of regaining custody of her children. By summer 2008, she was granted sole custody of her daughters, who had been living with their paternal grandparents all along. Matthew's parents were deeply distressed by this development. They believed Mary had intentionally caused their son's death and felt she had escaped proper punishment. Their repeated efforts to appeal failed, leaving the case unresolved. Meanwhile, a separate issue involving allegations of fraud was never brought to trial, as the bank refrained from filing formal charges, leading the whole matter to be dropped. Now, shifting to a different yet similarly unsettling story, we turn to the case of Sir Ben McLaughlin in late February of 2006. She was discovered dead in her locked bedroom in Knockesh, Goldtown, Dublin 14. Initially presumed to have taken her own life, suspicions quickly arose among her family that she had been subjected to a violent murder. Sir Ben was one of 8 children born to Uwan and Deja McLaughlin, 7 girls and 1 boy. She worked as a chef at an electrical firm's canteen, and in 1989, at the age of 21, she met Brian Carney, a 31-year-old electrical engineer employed at the same company. Brian, a widower, was raising his toddler daughter Aisling alone after his wife's natural death a few years earlier. Over time, Sir Ben moved in with Brian and his daughter, and together they renovated their home before planning to sell it. Their relationship and their lives, however, were shadowed by secrets and unresolved tensions that ultimately culminated in tragedy. Sir Ben's journey into the catering industry began after training at the Shelburne Hotel, where she developed a modern approach to food that was ahead of its time. During the early 1990s, she used ingredients uncommon in Ireland, which are now considered standard. The traditional era of simple meat and potatoes had long passed. Brian, her partner, was not only an electrical engineer but also owned a music shop called Music City, which he sold in 2005. The couple became engaged in 1995 but separated soon after. Despite their split, they maintained regular contact, meeting for dinners every few months. Throughout their time apart, Brian abstained from other relationships and remained committed to building a future together. In January 2002, they reconciled and married, with their son Daniel arriving 6 months later. That same year, Brian and Sir Ben took a holiday in Spain, initially planning to buy a boat. Instead, they discovered a 200-year-old merchant's mansion on the island of MCA. They purchased the historic property for 25 million euros and transformed it into a boutique hotel featuring 6 luxurious bedrooms and a heated outdoor pool. Sir Ben's keen eye and impeccable taste guided much of the renovation, often traveling to gather unique pieces. Her culinary talent soon became the hotel's hallmark, with her barbecues becoming popular highlights for guests and locals alike. The hotel opened in January of 2003, and Sir Ben's hospitality contributed significantly to its success. While they frequently traveled between MCA and Ireland, Brian often returned home more during the lengthy holiday season, which stretched from March to December. During these times, Sir Ben managed the hotel and cared for their son, Dan. Those close to Sir Ben later remarked that toward the end, she seemed overwhelmed and weary, often displaying signs of tension when Brian was around. Despite her exhaustion, Sir Ben cherished regular visits from her large family, which always lifted her spirits. She appreciated family closeness and independence. Several years into managing the Spanish property, Sir Ben and Brian decided to build a new home beside their Dublin residence, contemplating selling or renting the original house. In 2006, Sir Ben returned to Dublin for a break, consulting a solicitor about the possibility of separating from Brian. The lawyer advised her to keep a detailed record of interactions with him. She enrolled Daniel locally and planned to approach Brian about relocating with their son to the new house under construction next door. While Sir Ben loved what she had created in Spain, she felt increasingly isolated and burdened, trying to raise their son without local family support. On the morning of Tuesday, the 28th of February, 2006, which also happened to be Brian's birthday, her sister Neve arrived at her house as usual. This morning, she left her car in the driveway and took the bus into the city, arriving around 9:30. Since she had her own key, she entered the house unaccompanied, only to find 3-year-old Daniel wandering alone on the ground floor. She then ascended the stairs, approaching Sir Ben's bedroom door, which was secured with a lock. When she called her name, there was no response. Concerned, she contacted her parents, informing them of the situation. Her father quickly arrived and forced open the door, discovering Sir Ben lying inside near the bedroom entrance. Owen gently touched Sir Ben's forehead and leg, but found her to be cold, a clear sign that she was no longer alive. At only 38 years old, Sir Ben's life had unexpectedly come to an end. The key to the room was discovered on the floor, mere inches from the door, seemingly pushed underneath. Without delay, Owen reached out to the Irish police, who arrived promptly and began examining the scene. Investigators noticed that the scene appeared staged. Photographs had been arranged around Sir Ben, resembling a memorial. A cord was partially wrapped around her neck, but it had been broken. Forensic experts observed indentations at the top of the door and noted that the other part of the cord was looped around the inside handle, giving the impression that she had attempted to hang herself. However, evidence later revealed that the cord would have snapped within approximately 5 seconds due to Sir Ben's weight, and that she would have needed to be at least 6 feet above the ground for it to be effective. Additional findings confirmed that Sir Ben had been dead for several hours, with rigor mortis fully developing. In an effort to prevent media interference and avoid publicity reminiscent of the Rachel O'Reilly case from 18 months earlier, authorities imposed a 2-day blackout on reporting and advised the family not to speak publicly. The silence was maintained until Sir Ben's mother-in-law informed the family of her passing, prompting the McLaughlin family to come together in shared sorrow. While Brian received little support, his sister offered comforting words. The family knew Sir Ben by her maiden name, suggesting they had access to confidential information not available to others. During police questioning, Brian was asked if he could leave immediately, but officers insisted he speak with detectives first. He inquired whether the police would want the clothes he was wearing, which seemed unusual. Eventually, he was permitted to depart after the interview, but chose not to hand over his clothing for examination. He had requested a specific garment from the back bedroom to change into, but police declined, allowing him to leave dressed as he was. Later that evening, Brian stayed with his parents and Daniel, while an officer visited the house to retrieve the clothes Brian had been wearing. On Thursday, March 2nd, it was found that his mother had washed laundry, an act seen as quite convenient in light of recent events. 49-year-old Brown was subsequently brought in for questioning and held for 12 hours. Reports detail that he was detained after being collected from his parents' home, initially cooperating but ultimately refusing to answer any questions. He was released later that evening, with authorities indicating that further inquiries were ongoing and a case file was being prepared for the Director of Public Prosecutions. Meanwhile, investigators questioned Siobhan's friends and relatives, discovering she had been unhappy in her marriage. She had visited a solicitor weeks prior to her passing and had sought advice from the Citizens Advice Bureau regarding separation and asset division. The family expressed suspicion towards Brian, describing him as a controlling individual. They shared examples such as Siobhan being forced to hand-wash dishes instead of using the dishwasher, which was considered too costly, and explained how Brian managed their finances closely, requiring his approval for all expenditures. Additionally, it was revealed that Siobhan had sold her apartment, after which Brian moved them to Spain, a decision one sister noted was Brian's dream, not hers. Siobhan's life was rooted in Ireland, with no ties to Spain, suggesting her isolation was a deliberate move by Brian to keep her away from her support network. Tensions between Brian and the McLaughlin family grew over time. Brian delayed the funeral by 10 days, insisting on a second autopsy before proceeding. When the death notice was published, the family referred to Siobhan solely as McLaughlin, omitting her married name or any mention of Brian. They also published a separate notice in a different publication. During the funeral on March 11th, a photograph of Siobhan and her son was placed beside the coffin, but Brian was intentionally excluded. Moreover, the McLaughlin and Carney families sat separately in the church, avoiding eye contact and interaction, an expression of genuine feelings common among Irish people. The week following the funeral, law enforcement officials traveled to Spain, searching the hotel owned jointly by Siobhan and Brian. Investigators recovered his mobile phone data, placing him at the crime scene during the time Siobhan is believed to have died. Witnesses reported seeing Brian in the driveway when he claimed to be at his brother's house that morning. Additionally, forensic analysis revealed Brian's DNA on part of the vacuum cord used in the incident. On June 22, 2006, Brian was rearrested and questioned at Dundrum Garda Station. After 8 hours of interrogation, he was released without formal charges. Law enforcement officials felt confident in their evidence and compiled a comprehensive case file including all new information collected over the months, submitting it for review by the Director of Public Prosecutions. Meanwhile, Brian traveled to Spain to oversee preparations for the upcoming season of the hotel, although the situation remained under active investigation. Following the cancellation of the investigation into Siobhan's death, reports of staff resignation soon emerged, citing the difficulty of working without her. Siobhan, who had been the driving force behind the business's success, commanded unwavering loyalty from her team, far more than from her employer, Brian. This loyalty mirrored the kind of person Siobhan was, inspiring dedication and respect. Meanwhile, the guards returned to their investigation in Spain, submitting testimonies under oath before a Spanish judge. Staff members provided detailed accounts of Siobhan's behavior in the weeks leading up to December 10, 2006. Her family held a vigil outside her home where she was killed, attended by around 200 mourners. Her sister described Siobhan as the embodiment of joy, fun, and vitality, a wonderful mother, a delightful sister, a cherished daughter, and a true friend. On that day, they held hands, sang hymns, and displayed pictures of her, united in grief and remembrance. In January of 2007, media reports again cited police sources expressing cautious confidence that an arrest was imminent. However, the prosecutors acknowledged that the significant evidence collection would require time. On the 17th of January, the inquest into Siobhan's death was postponed. Her family urged the public to come forward with any new information, as authorities sought additional proof to support a case against the main suspect, Brian. Brian, who did not appear at the brief court hearing, was later detained at his home on the 30th of May, 2007. He faced charges of Siobhan's homicide, was brought before a judge, and remanded into custody. His response was a plea of not guilty, and no bail application was submitted. The McLaughlins attended, but Kearney avoided eye contact and showed disrespect by chewing gum during the proceedings. He was granted bail on the 6th of June after successfully appealing to the High Court. Conditions included surrendering his passport, paying €100, and posting a €60,000 bond, secured by his brother Patrick. Kearney also had to report weekly to Dundrum Garda Station. A trial date was set for early 2008, with a 6-month window to present evidence and reach a verdict. The trial commenced on February 11th, with Kearney declaring himself not guilty before Justice Barry White and a jury of 12. However, one juror, an employee of a home security company that had installed and maintained the Kearney residence system, was excused, as the defense preferred an impartial jury. The judge dismissed the initial panel and swore in a new jury a week later. Prosecutors argued that Kearney murdered Siobhan, attempted to craft a suicide scene, and left his son alone before heading to work. The McLaughlin family testified about the events surrounding her death, including her father's discovery of her body and her mother's account of the morning. The mother recounted how, while on the phone with Kearney, she had failed to mention her distress, and he did not inquire further. Deja confirmed that in 1999, Siobhan had checked herself into the St. John of God psychiatric unit after experiencing stress and a minor breakdown. She had returned to work after 5 days. In 2005, Kearney had apparently called Bridget, Siobhan's sister, to say Siobhan was struggling emotionally. However, when Bridget called Siobhan directly, she seemed perfectly well. An employee of Colors Electrical, Ward, stated that Kearney often arrived at work around 8:30 in the morning, hinting at his routine. On the morning of Siobhan's death, the suspect arrived unusually early, between 7:50 and 8 o'clock, even though he usually came around 9. A solicitor confirmed that several letters regarding the couple's separation had been sent to Kearney, yet he never responded to any of these communications. Kearney's statement to the security guards was then read aloud. He explained that on the day Siobhan passed away, her door was locked when he checked in the morning. He recounted that Siobhan and Daniel had returned from visiting a friend's house around 8:30 the previous evening. Kearney had put Daniel to sleep and stayed in the same room, while Siobhan slept in the master bedroom. He stated they woke up at 7 sharp the following morning, after which he prepared breakfast, put on a DVD for Daniel, and went upstairs to brush his teeth. When he tried to enter Siobhan's room, he found it was locked. He called out to her, announced his departure, kissed Daniel goodbye, and left for work. Further court proceedings were temporarily halted when a juror became ill, but resumed the next day. Evidence indicated that Siobhan could not have hanged herself. The forensic examiner identified marks on her neck and chin, as well as fractures of the larynx, bleeding, and abrasions on her chin. These injuries suggested they did not result from hanging. Instead, it appeared that significant force had been used. Siobhan had been forcibly restrained, with evidence of her being held by the neck and a ligature applied to accelerate her death. Security footage showed no signs of forced entry, as the house's windows and doors were secure. The alarm system confirmed activation at 10:50 p.m. on the previous night, followed by an immediate deactivation, and then it was reactivated at 7:37 a.m. the next morning. The following morning, prior to shutting down again, authorities conducted a meticulous search of the Kearney residence, uncovering a diary tucked away in the airing cupboard. Handwriting inside was authenticated as Siobhan's, confirmed by her sister and solicitor, who advised her to keep a record of her marriage to Kearney. Additionally, her passport was discovered wrapped in sheets and clothing in another part of the house, while a 500-pound note was found concealed in a drawer among some wrapping paper. A financial forensic expert was called to testify next. It was revealed that Kearney owned properties in Ireland, had interests in an electrical business, and also managed a hotel. Despite his substantial assets, he was cash-strapped. On Monday, the 3rd of March, the court began closing arguments. The defense team argued that Kearney's financial situation made a separation from Siobhan complicated. He wanted to sell one of his properties at KN Nashi, but if Siobhan intended to move into it, that plan would be impossible. He would need to find alternative ways to settle his debts. The evidence indicated that Siobhan was planning her departure. She had begun saving money secretly, hiding her passport, maintaining a diary about her relationship, and sending letters through her solicitor, clear signs of her intent to leave Kearney. Her forward-looking attitude and plans for the future contradicted any notion of suicidal intent. Forensic evidence further supported the argument that her death was unlikely to have been self-inflicted. Kearney himself acknowledged that only he, Siobhan, and their son had been present that evening. The defense counsel urged caution, emphasizing that the prosecution had presented no concrete evidence and that the case rested largely on circumstantial details. They advised the jury to consider what was missing. There was no history of violence, no custody disputes, no signs of alcohol abuse or jealousy. Jurors were urged to dismiss emotional influence from witnesses connected to the victim's family. It is recognized that abuse need not leave visible injuries. Rather, it can involve subtle patterns of control. In Siobhan's case, she had been strangled, and while she appeared physically unharmed, evidence indicated extreme coercive control. For instance, Kearney's insistence that she hand-washed dishes to save money exemplified controlling behavior. When Siobhan decided to seek legal assistance, it became too much for Kearney, leading to her tragic death. Coercive control is increasingly acknowledged as a form of domestic abuse, even absent physical violence, and is a growing concern in recent years. On the 4th of March, Justice Barry White addressed the jury, mistakenly referring to the victim as Rachel rather than Siobhan during his summing up. This error was significant, as it coincided with his oversight of the case of another woman named Rachel O'Reilly, who also died under similar circumstances within 18 months. The judge later apologized for the mistake, which underscored the unfortunate overlap of these cases, both involving women who had passed away in comparable situations. That evening, the jury was dismissed, only to reconvene the next day to deliver a majority verdict of guilty, 11 jurors in favor, 1 against, on charges of murder. As the verdict was read, McLaughlin's family members embraced and shed tears, while Kearney remained expressionless, showing no reaction. His daughter, seated beside him, was visibly upset and crying. In a poignant gesture, Kearney removed his wedding ring and handed his wallet to her, symbolizing a personal farewell. Immediately afterwards, Kearney was sentenced to life imprisonment. The court convicted him on the spot. The victim's family requested the opportunity to deliver an impact statement, but this was denied, a decision that puzzled many observers. Kearney was then escorted to a prison vehicle and transferred to Whitfield Prison to begin his sentence. He promptly lodged an appeal, which was heard in 2009, resulting in the dismissal of his case by a panel of 3 judges. In 2012, his request to escalate the appeal to the Supreme Court was rejected. 7 years later, in 2019, Kearney's applications for parole were denied on 2 separate occasions. His sister shared with the local radio station that the parole board had recommended 2 visits to see his family, suggesting they were considering his release. However, such suggestions only materialize if the individual admits guilt, a step Kearney has not taken. As of 2022, the final decision on his release still rests with the Minister for Justice, and Kearney remains incarcerated. During his time in prison, he took on the role of a counselor, assisting fellow inmates with mental health support, and he also trained in first aid. He decided to sell a hotel in Spain, though he later withdrew the listing in 2010. The hotel, managed now by his brother Patrick and his wife, remains operational, possibly under new ownership. Kearney explained that keeping the hotel was important for his son's education. Meanwhile, the McLaughlin family aimed to adopt Daniel, though details remain unclear and he appears to be living peacefully. He and his half-sister Ashlyn deserve stability after all they've endured. The house where Siobhan was tragically lost was previously inhabited by a family with 3 children, but it was put up for sale at a price of $1 million. In 2008, an estimated 4 million euros changed hands, presumed to have been sold since then. Kearney's daughter resided in a new house during his period of freedom, yet there have been no recent updates regarding her whereabouts. If Kearney opts to liquidate all his possessions and settle his debts, he could amass a considerable fortune, potentially reaching millionaire status once released. His family contemplated pursuing legal action to claim Siobhan's chair, if not their other assets. However, public details about such plans remain undisclosed. Following Kearney's conviction, Siobhan's sister Aisling issued a statement expressing that, although their lives had been deeply affected by Siobhan's loss, justice had now been served. She also conveyed gratitude for the time they shared with Siobhan, affectionately called Shawnee by her family. Despite their appreciation, they continue to feel a profound missing of her presence every hour of every day. The painful longing to see her again and to protect her persists, even knowing it is now beyond their reach. Meanwhile, another tragic case unfolds with the story of Alicia Ross, a young Canadian woman who vanished without a trace from her bedroom one night. Police were unable to find her body or significant evidence, causing the investigation to stagnate. The case might have remained unresolved had the perpetrator not surrendered themselves to authorities. Alicia, born on February 8, 1980, in Markham, Ontario, had no known biological parents. They relinquished their rights, and she was adopted as an infant by Marvin and Sharon Ross. Her adoptive family provided her with love and support, nurturing her talents and passions. As Alicia grew, her parents divorced but maintained a friendly relationship, often collaborating in her upbringing. Sharon later remarried Julius Forrest, who treated Alicia as his own daughter. She excelled academically, showing particular talent in art and developing a passion for photography and exploring new places. After completing secondary school, Alicia spent a year in Australia traveling and experiencing new environments before returning home and beginning university studies. In the summer of 2005, at the age of 25, Alicia went on a mountain hike with friends, where she met Sean, a young man 4 years her senior. Their connection quickly blossomed into a romantic relationship, undeterred by their age difference. On August 16th, Alicia, accompanied by her adoptive mother and their dogs, enjoyed a walk in the park. She appeared cheerful and excited, sharing news about an impending promotion to a senior sales manager position at her workplace, an achievement she was especially proud of. This series of events underscores the unpredictable and often tragic turns life can take, highlighting the importance of vigilance and compassion in the face of adversity. After years of diligent effort, she was finally nearing a significant breakthrough. The young woman often shared her hopes about her new relationship with Sean, whom she had been dating for a little over a month. Their connection seemed promising, and she felt deeply in love. She envisioned their relationship growing stronger, imagining a future where she could introduce him to her adoptive parents during a family dinner. Following a leisurely walk in the park, she returned home while her daughter went out on a date with her boyfriend. She reassured her mother that she wouldn't be away long, as she had an early start the next day when her promotion was to be decided. They parted amicably, each heading on their separate ways. Unfortunately, that was the last moment anyone saw her alive. The meeting between her and Sean that evening would later be linked to a case that remained unresolved. Alicia had invited him over, and they enjoyed each other's company well into the night. Around midnight, Sean left her house. Alicia saw him off at the backyard gate, the same exit through which he departed. They exchanged a quick kiss, with Sean promising to call as soon as he reached home. As promised, he phoned her around midnight, but she didn't answer. Assuming she had simply fallen asleep, he didn't worry much. However, when morning came and she still didn't respond to further calls, concern grew. Sean contacted a friend who worked with Alicia and learned she hadn't shown up for work that day. Recognizing the seriousness, he rushed to her house. That same morning, Sharon and Julius had left for a game of golf with friends at precisely 10 o'clock, noticing Alicia's car in the driveway but assuming she was elsewhere. Later, Sean arrived at Alicia's home but found no sign of her and quickly reported her missing. He also called Sharon to inform her of her daughter's disappearance. By the time they arrived, police were already on scene, inspecting the area and questioning Sean, who appeared visibly distressed. Sharon immediately noted that all of Alicia's personal belongings, her purse, passport, driver's license, keys, cell phone, and cash, were still in her room. This suggested she hadn't left voluntarily or in haste. The gate was open but not forced, indicating she might have left willingly or been removed by someone she trusted. In the backyard, officers found evidence of disturbance on the lawn, hinting at a struggle or unusual activity. This baffling case remained unresolved, with crucial details pointing to either an intentional departure or an abduction that defied easy explanation. In one particular area, flowers had been trampled as if someone had fallen there, and nearby, investigators found a pair of cigarettes and the right sandal of a girl, the same one she had worn the previous evening. These items were laid out neatly in a straight line. Neither Alicia nor her parents smoked, which meant the cigarettes did not belong to them. Sean claimed he never smoked that brand, leaving the ownership uncertain. Almost immediately, Sean was singled out as the primary suspect. His nervousness and his somewhat muddled, inconsistent account raised suspicion. Furthermore, he was the first to notify the police about Alicia's disappearance, even before consulting her parents or confirming if they had seen her that evening. This suggested he was already aware she was missing. Evidence collected at the scene included biological traces on Alicia's bed that matched both her and Sean, leading investigators to theorize that Alicia might have refused Sean's intimacy and that he could have used force. Subsequently, he attempted to conceal his involvement by staging her disappearance, which police suspected was linked to him ending her life. When Sean was brought in for questioning, he appeared deeply upset and distressed at being considered a suspect. He vehemently denied harming Alicia, claiming his love for her was genuine. He acknowledged that they had shared close moments that evening, but insisted all was consensual. The girl's parents and friends spoke highly of Sean, noting he had no conflicts with Alicia. Their relationship was progressing rapidly and happily, with Alicia even hopeful about their future together. Her parents emphasized that Alicia had no reason to leave voluntarily. She was eager for a promotion at her beloved workplace, and as a responsible person, she would have informed them if something unforeseen had occurred. They believed she would never abandon her belongings, such as her documents, money, or phone. Law enforcement lacked concrete evidence to detain Sean at this stage. After thorough questioning, they released him, though they continued to keep him under cautious watch. Sean appeared visibly dejected and deeply troubled by the ongoing search. The following day, efforts to locate Alicia intensified. Authorities started an extensive investigation, including a detailed inspection of her home and surroundings, questioning neighbors and examining the nearby area. Despite these efforts, no witnesses reported any suspicious activity or noises during that night. The police hypothesized that Alicia disappeared sometime between midnight, when she had said goodnight to Sean, and dawn, a time when streets are usually quiet and devoid of activity. This made gathering eyewitness accounts particularly difficult. To aid in identification, her photographs were distributed across the city as flyers, hoping to prompt tips or sightings that could help bring her home safely. The story of the missing woman gained widespread media attention across popular outlets, igniting intense public interest. As the case unfolded, hundreds of volunteers and concerned citizens flocked to aid the search, driven by the hope of uncovering her whereabouts. Law enforcement received countless daily calls related to the case, though many turned out to be false or mistaken. Nevertheless, each tip was subject to investigation, with authorities expanding the search perimeter to include abandoned buildings, wooded areas, and wastelands in their relentless pursuit of clues. Despite still being the primary suspect, Sean actively participated in the ongoing efforts. Feeling wronged, he decided to reach out to the media, giving a heartfelt interview in which he expressed his deep affection for Alicia. He displayed photographs of them together, looking very happy, and tearfully pleaded for help, appearing deeply distressed by the situation. The extensive search operation in Ontario became one of the largest in the region's history, with even the most difficult-to-access ravines and marshy terrains thoroughly examined, yet no concrete evidence or leads emerged to locate the missing woman. Alicia's parents appealed publicly, confidently stating they believed she was alive but possibly held against her will somewhere. They urged anyone with knowledge of her whereabouts to ensure her safe return and to avoid harm. As the investigation progressed, the police began to suspect that someone Alicia knew personally was responsible for her disappearance. The absence of signs of struggle, forced entry, or any physical altercation supported this theory, yet no definitive proof was found. The only trace was a heavily smudged fingerprint on a cigarette but could not be identified. Investigators carefully reviewed Alicia's contacts, including all calls, messages, and emails, but nothing suspicious surfaced. On the sixth day, authorities officially classified her case as a criminal matter. Despite the lack of solid evidence, Sean remained the main suspect. He lived alone about 10 miles from Alicia's residence. After realizing that public suspicion had intensified following his media interview, he ceased participating in the search and refused further communication with the press. He was interviewed multiple times, maintaining a consistent story, and was offered a lie detector test, all of which he declined. 2 weeks after her disappearance, Sean was detained on unrelated charges, specifically for driving under the influence and resisting arrest. Rumors circulated that he was attempting to drown his guilt in alcohol. Following his arrest, Alicia's parents issued another statement, expressing that they had not personally known Sean well, and the case remained unresolved. In this case, the only knowledge about the suspect had come through their daughter's accounts, which painted a picture of happiness. Yet, the parents now wondered if she might have hidden certain things to protect them from worry, especially since she had planned to introduce her boyfriend soon. Law enforcement officials questioned neighbors of Sean to detect any unusual activities, such as him disposing of large trash bags, acting suspiciously, leaving unexpectedly, or cleaning his vehicle. However, these inquiries yielded no meaningful clues. As time passed, investigators hoped Sean might eventually reveal the truth voluntarily. About a month after Alicia's disappearance, media coverage waned and attention shifted away from her case. The ongoing search had lost its prominence in newspapers and broadcasts, and authorities appeared to have hit a dead end. The only remaining approach was to keep pressing Sean for a confession, hoping he might ultimately disclose what truly happened. Then, unexpectedly, a new lead emerged. On September 20th, 2005, over a month following Alicia's disappearance, a 31-year-old local named Daniel Sylvester contacted police voluntarily. He confessed to causing Alicia's death and disclosed where her remains were hidden. Notably, he had not been suspected earlier, and authorities had paid him no initial attention. At first, some thought Sylvester sought notoriety by taking responsibility for such a high-profile case. Yet confirmation came when police found the girl's body at the location Sylvester had specified. The suspect was an unemployed man who lived in his mother's house, situated next to the Ross family property. The two homes were separated by overgrown shrubs, forming a nearly impenetrable barrier. Despite sharing the same neighborhood virtually all their lives, Daniel and Alicia had never interacted. She had only seen him from afar and considered him mentally unwell because of his odd behavior. Law enforcement had not focused on Daniel earlier because he was a reclusive individual who kept to himself, attracting little attention. From childhood, Daniel faced significant social challenges, struggling to form friendships and facing ridicule at school. His repeated failures to build relationships fostered deep resentment toward women, whom he felt rejected him. By the age of 8, he was diagnosed with a social behavioral disorder and underwent ongoing psychological treatment, although it yielded limited progress. In adolescence, Daniel admitted to fantasizing about suddenly overpowering a girl, which he found thrilling. However, experts believed these fantasies remained fantasies and would unlikely turn into real actions. After finishing school, Daniel ceased attending therapy sessions, abandoned his studies, and retreated into a secluded life. He moved into his mother's house, choosing to isolate himself from society. His days were spent confined within his room, often browsing adult websites, while occasionally slipping outside in the evenings to secretly observe his neighbors through their windows. He especially found excitement in watching others engaged in private acts, although he himself remained a virgin well into his 30s, satisfying his needs through solitary pursuits. His neighbors noticed little about him, perceiving him as a harmless individual. Initially, Sylvester claimed that the incident involving the girl was accidental and that he had hidden the body to avoid repercussions. According to his account, once he realized she was no longer alive, he placed her in the trunk of his mother's car and drove approximately 50 miles out of town, stashing her in a dense, bushy ravine beside a rural road. 3 weeks later, fearing the body might be discovered, he moved it again, this time deeper into a remote area under cover of darkness. The body was eventually discovered in the location Daniel had indicated, confirming his involvement. The state of the remains, however, revealed extreme cruelty, with injuries that resembled the aftermath of a major vehicle collision. An autopsy showed Alicia's ribs, neck, and both arms were nearly shattered, and she had sustained extensive internal head trauma with internal bleeding. The precise cause of her death could not be pinpointed, but at least 3 injuries were incompatible with life. Forensic analysts were stunned, having never encountered such extensive trauma before. Officials needed to piece together the events of that tragic night to understand how Alicia had been harmed. Daniel's initial story claimed he had argued with a neighbor on a path between their homes. During this confrontation, the neighbor called him a loser, provoking his anger, which led him to strike her on the head. He said that after she fell, he kicked her multiple times in the chest, and upon realizing she was unconscious, decided to conceal her body. He later moved the body again when the search area expanded. However, inconsistencies surfaced. It remained unclear why Daniel was at his neighbor's house that night, what sparked their argument, and what motivated such brutal violence. The evidence at the scene was laid out in a direct line, complicating efforts to reconstruct the sequence of events. The investigation revealed that Sylvester had been watching the neighbors. Notably, he observed Alicia's boyfriend arrive, approach their house closely as they were intimate, and watch them from a nearby bush. As midnight approached, the couple stepped outside and shared a kiss near the gate, only a few feet from where Daniel was observing. The girl returned to her yard and immediately noticed Daniel. Her anger surged as she realized he had been secretly watching her and her boyfriend all along. She began shouting at him, calling him a pervert and demanding his immediate departure. In her fury, she also labeled him a loser, which triggered a violent reaction from Sylvester. Memories of similar slurs from his childhood flashed through his mind, fueling his rage. In a burst of aggression, Sylvester struck the girl with force, knocking her to the ground. She fought back, grabbing his hair as he attempted to choke her. As his grip loosened, Daniel quickly intervened, starting to kick Alicia while she was on the ground, targeting her chest, neck, and head. Forensic experts later confirmed that her injuries included 33 fractures across her body, along with severe internal bleeding. When Sylvester realized his neighbor was no longer breathing, he moved her body to his garage, undressed her, and then engaged in a disturbing act to alleviate his tension. His testimony indicated that he did not violate the victim's body, and an examination supported this. Afterwards, he placed her corpse in the trunk of his mother's car and drove to a secluded location outside the city. Upon returning home, Sylvester showered, changed clothes, and acted as if nothing had happened. The clothing, belongings of the victim, and towels he used to clean the scene were packed in trash bags and disposed of discreetly. The start of the trial and sentencing occurred only in April of 2007, at which point new details emerged publicly. Sylvester admitted to ending his neighbor's life, though both he and his lawyer maintained it was unintentional. The defense petitioned for a psychiatric assessment, arguing that he was mentally ill and should not be fully responsible for his actions. They suggested treatment in a mental health facility instead of incarceration. Conversely, the prosecutor contended that despite his mental health issues and difficulty managing anger, Sylvester acted knowingly. They argued he mercilessly kicked the girl, fully aware that his actions could result in her death. A court-ordered psychiatric evaluation confirmed Sylvester's full legal responsibility for his behavior. Concerning the items found in his backyard, arranged in a straight line, he never confessed to placing them there. On the 7th of May 2007, the court found him guilty of a second-degree offense and sentenced him to life imprisonment with eligibility for parole after 16 years. Over a year later, Canadian singer and songwriter Kathleen Edwards released a song titled Alicia Ross, giving voice to the young woman's final moments. Meanwhile, in March of 2008, the United States faced a major political scandal: the resignation of New York's governor, Eliot Spitzer, following his involvement in a high-profile prostitution controversy that ignited nationwide debates about ethics and integrity. Eliot Spitzer had earned a reputation as a strong and principled prosecutor, known for his relentless pursuit of corporate misconduct and corruption during his time as New York's Attorney General. His reputation as the Sheriff of Wall Street reflected his vigorous efforts to uphold ethical standards in finance and government. However, his career took a dramatic turn on March 10, 2008, when reports surfaced that linked him to a high-end escort service called the Emperor's Club VIP. An investigation uncovered that Spitzer had arranged an encounter with a prostitute named Kristen at a Washington, D.C. hotel earlier that year. This revelation shocked many because it starkly contrasted with his former fight against organized crime and prostitution. Federal authorities had been monitoring the operations of the escort ring for months, intercepting communications that eventually pointed to Spitzer as a client, referred to as Client 9. The case originally aimed at dismantling the prostitution network, but it grew into a scandal when investigators linked Spitzer directly to the activities. Engaging in such conduct is illegal in most U.S. states, and transporting someone across state lines for illicit purposes could have violated federal law, specifically the Mann Act. Although Spitzer was never formally charged, The potential legal consequences loomed large. The political and personal repercussions, however, were immediate and severe. 2 days after the story broke, facing intense pressure from allies and critics alike, he announced his resignation as governor, effective March 17th. In his resignation statement, he explained that his private failings should not interfere with his duties, but his departure signaled a stunning fall from grace. Once celebrated as a rising star in the Democratic Party, his scandal ignited a broader debate about the boundaries between personal lives and public service. Many debated whether private misconduct should disqualify someone from holding office, with some arguing that personal faults are separate from professional competence. Others believed such actions demonstrated poor judgment and a lack of integrity, making the individual unfit for leadership. The scandal also highlighted the ongoing challenges law enforcement faces when addressing clandestine activities like prostitution, especially involving prominent figures. Following this ordeal, Spitzer attempted to move forward, making a few media appearances and running for New York City Comptroller in 2013. Despite these efforts, the scandal remained a defining moment in his career, illustrating how personal choices can deeply affect public trust and political fate. The scandal of March 2008 marked a pivotal moment in Elliot Spitzer's life, serving as a stark warning about the dangers of personal misconduct and the delicate nature of public confidence. It underscores the high standards expected from public officials and the rapid consequences that follow when those standards are betrayed. Additionally, the incident highlights ongoing societal tensions between safeguarding individual privacy and maintaining transparency and accountability in leadership, a debate still pertinent in contemporary politics. The fallout from Spitzer's revelation was immediate and severe. Once celebrated for his vigorous stance against corruption, the governor now faced intense scrutiny from the media and legal authorities. Every detail of his involvement with the high-end escort service known as the Emperor's Club VIP was scrutinized, fueling national discussions on the abuse of power and the inconsistencies often observed in law enforcement. Law enforcement agencies had uncovered financial transactions that raised suspicion, large structured wire transfers designed to evade detection, ultimately leading investigators to Spitzer. Evidence showed that he had frequently used an alias, George Fox, to arrange personal meetings. On February the 13th, 2008, he booked a hotel room at Washington's Mayflower Hotel and wired more than $4,000 to meet a woman named Kristen, a sum that prompted further questions about the extent of his involvement. These details painted a troubling picture of a political figure entangled in a clandestine world of illicit encounters. Following the revelation, Spitzer's supporters rapidly withdrew their backing. Supporters who had previously praised his integrity distanced themselves, and the Democratic Party, already embroiled in a contentious election cycle, perceived his downfall as an unwelcome distraction. Leading figures, including then-Senator Hillary Clinton and presidential hopeful Barack Obama, chose to avoid detailed commentary, reflecting the delicate nature of the situation. Public reactions ranged from outrage and disappointment to a gripping curiosity. Many viewed Spitzer as a symbol of hypocrisy, an advocate for justice yet caught in personal misconduct, paralleling past political scandals such as Bill Clinton's affair with Monica Lewinsky. However, Spitzer's case stood out due to the severity and visibility of his transgressions, prompting a broader reflection on the expectations and vulnerabilities faced by those in positions of power. The investigation into New York's illegal prostitution operations revealed a long history of efforts to crack down on such rings. The scandal that erupted drew widespread attention, embarrassing many public figures and sparking intense media coverage. It also had profound repercussions on the personal life of Elliot Spitzer, the prominent politician involved. When he publicly announced his resignation on March 12th, his wife, Silda Wall Spitzer, stood silent and visibly distressed, becoming a stark symbol of the fallout from betrayal and scandal. The damage to their marriage was evident, and in the years that followed, they quietly divorced, marking the lasting impact of the controversy. Legally, Spitzer faced a delicate situation. Although prostitution was unlawful in most states, The primary legal concern centered on whether he had broken the federal law known as the Mann Act, which forbids transporting individuals across state lines for illicit purposes. After extensive legal deliberation, federal prosecutors chose not to prosecute him, citing a lack of sufficient evidence for a criminal case. Nevertheless, the scandal inflicted severe and lasting harm to his reputation and political career. As the story unfolded, discussions emerged about the luxury escort services that operated in secrecy and the murky boundaries between legality, morality, and discretion. The scandal mainly brought to light an exclusive operation called the Emperor's Club VIP, which catered to the wealthy elite, offering discreet services that remained hidden from public view. Its exposure led to widespread questions about the extent of involvement by other influential figures, though few names surfaced publicly. For Spitzer, the path to recovery was uncertain. Some believed he might eventually regain political prominence over time, while others saw him as a cautionary example of hubris and hypocrisy. As he retreated from the spotlight, one thing was clear: he had become a symbol of a downfall rooted in personal and professional misjudgment. In the aftermath of his resignation, Spitzer largely disappeared from the political stage, leaving behind a reputation tarnished by scandal. The political landscape moved forward, but his personal consequences persisted. No longer recognized as a powerful prosecutor or an ambitious figure with presidential ambitions, he was now primarily remembered as the individual who had undone his career through a reckless choice. Despite this public disgrace, Spitzer eventually sought a new direction. By 2009, he reappeared on television as a commentator on legal and financial issues. Some critics dismissed his efforts as an attempt to regain relevance, but others valued his insights, considering his sharp mind and deep knowledge of governance. Recognizing the potential of his expertise, Spitzer soon found a new platform, not as a politician, but as a media analyst. In 2010, he boldly took a step toward reintegration into public life by co-hosting a prime-time program, marking the beginning of his attempt at redemption in the public eye. Eliot Spitzer's political career was deeply overshadowed by a scandal that profoundly damaged his reputation. His attempt to rebrand himself as a political commentator on CNN's show Parker Spitzer failed to gain solid ratings, and the public's response was mixed. While some viewed him as an articulate and insightful speaker, many remained fixated on the scandal that had led to his downfall. Less than a year after its debut, the show was canceled, underscoring how lingering doubts prevented him from fully returning to the public eye. Undeterred, Spitzer sought to re-enter politics in 2013 by running for New York City Comptroller, a role less prominent than the governorship but still significant. His campaign attracted intense media attention, igniting debates about redemption and whether remorseful politicians deserve second chances. Ultimately, voters were not prepared to forgive, and Spitzer was defeated in the Democratic primary by Scott Stringer, marking an effective end to his political ambitions. Meanwhile, the woman involved in the scandal, Ashley Dupre, initially known only by a pseudonym, also faced the media spotlight. She gave interviews and eventually transitioned into the entertainment industry, managing to distance herself from her past more successfully than Spitzer. She married and started a family, carving out a new life beyond the scandal. The escort service linked to Spitzer's downfall, called the Emperor's Club VIP, was dismantled, with several individuals involved facing arrest and charges. Their sentences, however, were relatively lenient compared to the severe repercussions Spitzer himself endured. The scandal highlighted stark double standards within public life. Those in power often suffer more from social shame and legal consequences. Over the years, Spitzer's influence waned, though he occasionally made headlines. His personal life remained complex. His marriage to Silda Wall Spitzer ended in divorce. In 2016, he faced allegations of assault, but no charges followed. His scandal was more than a political misstep. It became a cautionary example of how personal flaws, ambition, and power struggles can lead to devastating outcomes. His story underscored the fragile nature of public trust and the relentless scrutiny faced by those in positions of authority. In the end, Eliot Spitzer's legacy is one of contradictions. He was a talented prosecutor, a reform-minded governor, and an advocate for justice, yet succumbed to the temptations he once aimed to eliminate. His rise and fall serve as a reminder that in politics and life alike, reputation is a delicate asset, easily lost and rarely fully recoverable.